Need motivation?
Watch the top 10 with Believe Nation.
Top 10, I got a top 10. Got my motivation high for my top 10. Gotta learn from the wise women and men all my life. Like na 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 na. For my top 10, top 10, na 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 na. This one's for my top 10.
Hey, it's Evan Carmichael, and I make these videos because you are probably the most ambitious person in your circle, but you know you're capable of more. And you get that push by surrounding yourself with the best. So today, let's learn from one of the best, Dr. Joe Dispenza, and my take on his top 50 rules for success. Enjoy.
The Newtonian world is all about the predictable. It's all about predicting a future. But the quantum model of reality is about causing an effect. The moment you start feeling abundant and worthy, you are generating wealth. The moment you're empowered and feel it, you're beginning to step towards your success. The moment you start feeling whole, your healing begins. And when you love yourself and you love all of life, you'll create an equal. And now you're causing an effect. And I think that's the difference between living as a victim in your world, saying, I am this way because of this person or that thing or this experience. They made me think and feel this way. When you switch that around, you become a creator of your world, and you start saying, my thinking and my feeling is changing an outcome in my life. And now that's a whole different game, and we start believing more that we're creators of reality.
How do we then go from that, like mechanistically, to begin this visualization process of something that's empowering? It's me in a different state. It's my future self. Is it meditation? What does that look like?
If you're not being defined by a vision of the future, then you're left with the old memories of the past, and you will be predictable in your life. And if you wake up in the morning and you're not being defined by a vision in the future, as you see the same people and you go to the same places and you do the exact same thing at the exact same time, it's no longer that your personality is creating your personal reality. Now your personal reality is affecting or creating your personality. Your environment is really controlling how you think and feel unconsciously, because every person, everything, every place, every experience has a neurological network in your brain. Every experience that you have with every person produces an emotion. So some people will use their boss to reaffirm their addiction to judgment. They'll use their enemy to reaffirm their addiction to hatred. They'll use their friends to reaffirm their addiction to suffering. So now they need the outer world to feel something. So to change then is to be greater than your environment, to be greater than the conditions in your world. And the environment is that seductive. So then why is meditation the tool? Well, let's sit down, let's close our eyes. Let's disconnect from your outer environment. So if you're seeing less things, there's less stimulation going to your brain. If you're playing soft music or you have earplugs in, less sensory information coming to your brain, so you're disconnecting from your environment. If you can sit your body down and tell it to stay like an animal, stay right here. I'm going to feed you when we're done. You can get up and check your emails, you can do all your texts, but right now, you're going to sit there and obey me. So then, when you do that properly, and you're not eating anything or smelling anything or tasting anything, you're not up experiencing and feeling anything, you would have to agree with me that you're being defined by a thought, right? So when the body wants to go back to its emotional past, and you become aware that your attention is on that emotion, and where you place your attention is where you place your energy, you're siphoning your energy out of the present moment into the past, and you become aware of that. And you settle your body back down in the present moment, because it's saying, well, it's 8 o'clock. You normally get upset because you're in traffic around this time. And here you are sitting, and we're used to feeling anger, and you're off schedule. Oh, it's 11 o'clock, and you usually check your emails and judge everybody. Well, the body's looking for that predictable chemical state. Every time you become aware that you're doing that, and your body is craving those emotions, and you settle it back down into the present moment, you're telling the body, it's no longer the mind, that you're the mind. And now your will is getting greater than the program. And if you keep doing this over and over again, over and over again, over and over again, just like training a stallion or a dog, it's just going to say, I'm going to sit. And the moment that happens, when the body's no longer the mind, when it finally surrenders, there's a liberation of energy. We go from particle to wave, from matter to energy, and we free ourselves from the chains of those emotions that keep us in the familiar past. And we've seen this thousands of times. In fact, we can actually predict it now on a brain scan. When I'm going through change in my life, or I have a specific outcome that I want to create, I love to get up early in the morning. That's my time. I'm a 4:30 in the morning guy because that's my time. The rest of the day I'm serving, but I love getting up early and changing and working and having some time to myself. And I believe that when I invest in myself, I invest in my future. And that time in my morning, nobody bothers me because that's my time. And because of brain waves and brain chemistry, the door between the conscious mind and the subconscious mind is more open. And so if I get up early and I'm kind of between theta and alpha, I don't have to work as hard. I'm not thinking, I just kind of relax into the moment. In the evening, I always ask myself, how did I do? How was one lifetime in one day? Where did I fall from grace? What happened? And so then when I look at seeing how I reacted to someone or something, or I made the choice that I could have made a better choice, I naturally, and we all do this, begin to think, well, if the same situation happened again, how would I do it differently? And that's the act of beginning to come up with a new plan. The act of rehearsing it in your mind begins to install the circuits in your brain, priming your brain so that when the next experience happens, you could modify your behaviors to do a better job in life. That's called plasticity. So it doesn't matter for me what meditation I do any longer. I like to just get up in a new state of being. I have people say to me, hey, I missed my meditation today, like I'm supposed to go like this or something. And I say to them, eyes open or eyes closed? You know, well, eyes open or eyes closed. You know, when you're passionate about something, you know, when people can't get up in the morning and they can't get out of bed, I'm going to tell you why. Because they can predict the feeling of everything that's going to happen in their life. And their body's resigned to the familiar. It says, oh, another mundane day. But remember when you were a kid and you were going on a field trip? What happened then? You were up and dressed and ready to go before your parents were up. You know why? Because you knew something unexpected was going to happen. That's how we should live our lives. Waking up with the understanding to expect the unexpected, and something unusual should happen in our life as a result of our efforts. And it's just those beginning moments where it begins to happen that we begin to prove to ourselves how powerful we really are. So take time in the morning and the evening and the rest of the day, check in with yourself at certain times to see if you're still in that energy. And if you're not, excuse yourself for a second, raise your energy, and step back into your life. And if you keep doing that over and over again, you'll become less frustrated, less impatient, less judgmental. It'll just become something of the past, and you'll be someone else.
The hardest part about change is not making the same choice as you did the day before. And the moment you decide to no longer think the same way, make the same choice, act the same way, create the same experience, or live by the same emotion, it's going to feel uncomfortable. It's going to feel unfamiliar. There is going to be a certain amount of uncertainty and unpredictability. And the moment you feel uncomfortable, you just stepped into the river of change. Now, most people, the moment they feel uncomfortable, they return back to the familiar state of the mind and body. They start thinking the same way, acting the same way, feeling the same way, and they say, this feels right. No, in fact, that feels familiar. Now, going from the old self to the new self is the neurological, is the chemical, is the biological, is the hormonal, and even genetic death of the old self. That void, that place of uncertainty, that unknown, is the perfect place to create in. And if you and I can become comfortable in that unknown and begin to decide who we do want to be. In other words, many people say when they're in that unknown, I can't predict my future. This doesn't feel right. Well, the best way to predict your future is to create it, not in the known, but in the unknown. So what if you said now, what thoughts do I want to fire and wire in my brain? What behaviors do I want to demonstrate? And if you were to close your eyes and begin to think about how you are going to act, the mere act of mentally rehearsing who you're going to be begins to install the neurological circuits in your brain to look like the experience has already occurred. Now, what that means is that the brain is primed in its circuitry to no longer be living in the past, but now living in the future.
As I said, 70% of the time, people live in stress, and living in stress is living in survival. Now, all organisms in nature can tolerate short-term stress. You know, a deer gets chased by a pack of coyotes. When it outruns the coyotes, it goes back to grazing and the event is over. And the definition of stress is when your brain and body are knocked out of balance, out of homeostasis. The stress response is what the body innately does to return itself back to order. So you're driving down the road, someone cuts you off, you jam on the brakes, you give them the finger, and then you settle back down and the event is over and boom, now everything's back to normal. But what if it's not a predator that's waiting for you outside the cave, but what if it's your coworker sitting right next to you? And all day long, you're turning on those chemicals because they're pushing all your emotional buttons. When you turn on the stress response and you can't turn it off, now you're headed for disease because no organism in nature can live in emergency mode for that extended period of time. It's a scientific fact that the hormones of stress downregulate genes and create disease, long-term effects. Human beings, because of the size of the neocortex, we can turn on the stress response just by thought alone. We can think about our problems and turn on those chemicals. That means then our thoughts could make us sick. So if it's possible that our thoughts could make us sick, is it possible then our thoughts could make us well? And the answer is absolutely yes. So then, what are the emotions that are connected to survival? Let's name them. Anger, aggression, hostility, hatred, competition, fear, anxiety, worry, pain, suffering, guilt, shame, unworthiness, envy, jealousy. Those are all created by the hormones of stress. And psychology calls them normal human states of consciousness. I call those altered states of consciousness. So then we tend to remember those traumatic events more because in survival, you better be ready if it happens again. And when the survival gene is switched on, you could have 10 really great things that happen to you in your day. And you just have one bad thing that happens and you cannot take your attention off that unhappy thing because the survival gene is switched on. Many years ago, after the DNA helix was discovered by Watson and Crick, they said the blueprints of life, all diseases are created from genes. It turns out less than 5%, more like 1% of people on the planet are born with a genetic condition like type 1 diabetes or Tay-Sachs disease or sickle cell anemia. The other 95 to 99% are created by lifestyle and by choices. You can take two identical twins, exact same genome. One dies at 51, the other one dies at 85. Same gene, different environment. So all of a sudden they said, we lied. That was wrong. It's not genes that create disease. It's the environment that signals the gene that creates disease. Well, okay. But that's not the whole truth too, because you could have two people working side by side in the same factory. One gets cancer after being exposed to a carcinogenic for 25 years. Both working for 25 years, the other one has no cancer at all. So there must be some internal order that would cause one person to not get it while another one does. So is it possible then, if the environment signals the gene, and it does, and the end product of an experience in the environment is called an emotion, can you signal the gene ahead of the environment by embracing an elevated emotion? We've done the research on this. We measured 7,500 different gene expressions in a group of people that came to an advanced event for 4 days. And we had them doing a seated meditation, a walking meditation, a laying down meditation, a standing meditation. And at the end of 4 days, just 4 days, the common 8 genes that were upregulated, 2 genes to suppress cancer cells and tumor growth, 2 genes for neurogenesis, the growth of new neurons in response to novel experiences and learning, the gene that signals stem cells to go to damaged areas and repair them, the gene for oxidative stress was upregulated. We started seeing all these genes that are very, very healthy to cause the body to flourish. Imagine if people were doing that for 3 months. We also measured telomeres, the little shoestrings on the end of DNA that tell us our biological age. We asked people to do the work, meditation, 5 out of 7 days for 60 days. Measure their telomeres that determine their biological age. 60 days later, 74% of the people lengthened their telomeres. 40% significant change. 20% a very remarkable change. That means that they got a little bit of their life back. If it had lengthened by 10%, they got 10% of their life back.
Also, to make sure you're actually taking action after watching this video, I've designed a special free worksheet just for this video. The worksheet will highlight all of the lessons learned in this video, as well as pull out our 3 favorite learnings and quotes that will inspire you to actually do something. The worksheet will also give you space to write down what your key takeaways are and your specific plan of action to make sure you're getting results. If you want the worksheet designed specifically for this video, absolutely for free, there's a link in the description below. Go click on it and start building the momentum in your life and your business. I'll see you there.
Number 5, you can't go to the future holding on to the biology of your past. Decide what thoughts you can bring to your future. Write them down. Thoughts like, I can't, it's too hard, I'll never change, I'll start tomorrow, what's wrong with me, it's someone else's fault. Decide on what behaviors or actions or unconscious habits you have to change. How do you talk? Do you complain? Do you blame? Do you make excuses? Do you feel sorry for yourself? Just become so conscious of those behaviors that you'll never go unconscious again. And lastly, you have to decide what emotions no longer belong in your future. That means if you want to be wealthy, you can't take lack. If you want to be healthy, you can't take insecurity or fear. You got to begin to condition your body to a new mind.
I think we're living in such an amazing time right now. I mean, if you are not being challenged in some way in your life, you're not alive. And all of this is an initiation. And I don't believe that you have to go to any school of ancient wisdom perched in the Himalayas or for information or training any longer. If you see your life as the school, as the initiation, then you can no longer be a victim to your life. You're going to have to meet the challenges in your life from a greater level of mind, greater than the mind that created it. And so there have been plenty of peer-reviewed articles on the power of peace-gathering projects that lower crime, that lower trauma incidences of death and economic growth. It's all related to what's happening right now for us. And it's not enough, though, for us to just focus on peace and expect the world to change, because in the peace-gathering projects, when the event was over, a lot of the crime and violence returned back to its ceiling level again. It's more important for us not only to embody that peace and feel it, but then to demonstrate it. And when we begin to demonstrate it, I think we give people permission to do the same. That means that we can't be preaching peace and then be stuck in traffic and, flipping people off or arguing with your coworker. You don't get to stand up for peace if you have conflict in your life. So when we start that self-contemplative process of looking within, and instead of judging someone or something, look to see if there's an aspect of ourselves within that person or within that situation that we may need to change. And if we're all doing that at the same time, something greater, a greater consciousness is going to emerge. And so I believe that it should never be about a person. It should be about principles. And when we stand up for principles, that creates community. Because you could be one belief or another belief, but if you're sharing the same principles, which are joy and freedom and cooperation and connection, that's what builds communities. So then, everything in our world right now is reminding us of separation. Whether it's war, whether it's violence, whether it's political deceit, whether it's prejudice, all of those things cause us to live by those stress hormones. And when we're living in that state of survival, we're not trusting, and we become more selfish. So then, starting our day asking ourselves, what would be the greatest expression of myself I'd like to present to the world? And then making the choice to not get up until we are that person, I think that begins to demonstrate greatness. And when there is adversity and when there are challenges in our life, the question, of course, becomes, how do we become supernatural? And that means we're going to have to do what feels unnatural at first. When everybody else is in poverty and lack, that's the time to give. When everybody else is in fear and vigilance, that's the time to show courage. When people are angry and hating and prejudiced, that's the time to show compassion. When people are competing to rush to get to the top, that's the time to change your energy and draw the experience to you. And if you keep doing what's unnatural over and over again, sooner or later, you're going to become supernatural.
There was another thing that you said that I thought was really powerful about how insights themselves are essentially inert. They don't do anything. What then do we do with an insight? How do we take a breakthrough moment and make sure that it's not just a breakthrough moment? Like, I guarantee people watching right now are having like 100 aha moments. For sure, that was definitely the case for me as I was researching you. And when you said that, I was like, and that's the danger, that you have the aha and then nothing.
Yeah, and it is a danger, because then people will shrink back into mediocrity, and they'll use the insight to excuse them from taking a leap. They'll say, yeah, I have a chemical imbalance in my brain. Yeah, my father was really overbearing. He was a perfectionist. That's why I am the way I am. People, they come up with stuff to excuse themselves. The insight is actually giving them permission to stay limited. And it's an amazing idea, because they'll say to you that they really want to get over their anxiety. But let's take your ex-husband, let's put him in a straitjacket, let's duct tape him and shoot him to the moon. Now what? What are you going to do now? You still have to make those changes. And so then the person's enemy dies, or something shifts in their life, and that person's gone, they'll find another person to hate. This is just how we function as human beings. We just slide another reason to feel those emotions. So I think when people start to understand this, I think knowledge is power, but knowledge about yourself is self-empowerment.
I think that in order for us to truly change, we have to get beyond ourselves. And that is one of the arts of transformation. And when the moment we are completely in the present moment, we cannot be running a program. It turns out, coincidentally, when we're truly in the present moment, all possibilities in the quantum field exist in the eternal now. So when we're truly present and we take our attention off our body, off of people in our lives, off of things, off of places, and even time, that's the moment, as I said today, we become pure consciousness. That's the moment now we are no longer playing by the laws of Newtonian physics. That's the moment we no longer have our attention invested in this three-dimensional reality. And where we place our attention is where we place our energy. So then the moment we become no body, no one, no thing, nowhere, and no time, that's the moment we get beyond ourselves. It is that act of being in the present moment that allows us to see new possibilities that we could never see from the place where we are stuck in our own programs and personality. The act of doing that, as Bruce said, is a skill, and it requires feedback. And feedback happens in a couple ways. One way you get feedback is to begin to measure the changes you see in your life. Another way is that you feel differently. Another way is that the voice in your head goes away that's telling you can't, it's too hard, you'll never change. This process, if it was easy, everybody would be doing it. And yet we are piercing a veil where people are waking up and they're beginning to take their power back. We already innately know how to do this. All we have to do is keep practicing until we start seeing those wonderful, wonderful feedback mechanisms happening in our life. The moment you start seeing those changes taking place in your life, you are going to pay attention to what you did to cause it. And the moment you pay attention to the cause of that action, you're no longer thinking that it's something out there that did it. You're beginning to realize it's what you did inside of you to produce it. That's when we begin to take our power back.
We have people that have been abused. We have people that have been traumatized, that have been assaulted. We have people that have had very, very difficult pasts. And have you ever heard me say to revisit the event Have you ever heard me say that? Never do we need to revisit the event, because once you do, you open the box. But what we want to do is overcome the emotion, because that's just what's lasting from the event. Living in guilt or grief or shame or unworthiness. I had someone tell me they lost a loved one the other day. And I said, well, okay. How long have you been grieving? Oh, about a year. Oh, really? Okay, well, suppose it was you that left and you were looking at the person you love moping around for a year. What would you say to them after a year if you truly love them? Get over it and have a happy life. I'm doing great. You should make yourself happy. You really love me? Live a happy life. That would be the greatest testament of love for each other. Because if you're suffering, then you're making this hard on me. And so then we always have to update our versions about reality, because it's the only way that we adapt. Don't believe everything you've read or heard. It just may not be the truth. There's always a greater truth that you and I can begin to investigate. Surely someone in eternity has had a similar problem as you and I, and they've gotten beyond it. Yes or no? Yes. So study that person. You want to be wealthy? Study wealthy people. Don't just have some panacea that you're just going to get wealthy. Read about wealthy people and find out that they lost everything and failed miserably 20, 50 times. But what they had as a characteristic, a quality in their personality, is they were persistent, and they kept changing, and they kept forgiving and letting go of the past and kept going. And sooner or later they ran into it, and when they had all the money they wanted, it was never about the money. It was just about that they could prove to themselves that they can do it. And you and I are no different than that. But if you can't create a future because of some emotion that keeps you in the past, you're going to have to square off with that emotion. And when you sit down and your body has all those physical sensations and it's getting vigilant and it wants to get up and it wants to move and you're just going, wow, and you're settling it down and you're working with it, you got to agree with me that something greater in you is climbing out of that body. Something greater in you is awakening. And when you're able to overcome those emotions, truly break the addiction, don't you know that you'll return back to your life and face the person that betrayed you? And you will see a part of yourself that you used to be that you no longer are, and you're not going to have anything else but love for them. In fact, you're going to have compassion for them because you're going to realize how stuck they are, and you're liberated and free.
If you think about this, your senses plug you into your external environment. Everything you're seeing or smelling or tasting or feeling or hearing, all of your five senses are affecting your brain. So if you're waking up in the morning and you're going through the same routine behaviors as you did the day before, and you're not in the process of being defined by a vision of the future, then you're for the most part left with the old hardware in your brain from the past. As a matter of fact, your brain is organized to reflect everything you know from the past. So as people wake up and they begin to pay attention to their body, they start to look around in their environment, they start to do typical things, it's the external environment that's turning on different circuits in their brain, causing them to think equal to their environment. And if you have the idea that your thoughts have something to do with your destiny, as long as you're thinking equal to your environment, you keep creating the same reality over and over again. So to change is to think greater than your environment, to think greater than the circumstances in your world, to think greater than the conditions in your life. And I think every great person in history understood this. They were defined by a vision that was much bigger than them.
We have a huge frontal lobe, and it's 40% of our entire brain. And most people, when they have a thought, they just think that that's the truth. And I think one of my greatest realizations in my own journey was just because you have a thought doesn't necessarily mean it's true. So if you think 60 to 70,000 thoughts in one day, and we do, and 90% of those thoughts are the same thoughts as the day before, and you believe that your thoughts have something to do with your destiny, your life's not going to change very much, because the same thought leads to the same choice leads to the same behavior creates the same experience, and the same experience produces the same emotion. And so then the act of becoming conscious of this process to begin to become more aware of how you think, how you act, and how you feel. It's called metacognition. And so then, why is that important? Because the more conscious you become of those unconscious states of mind and body, the less likely you're going to go unconscious during the day. And that thought is not going to slip by your awareness unchecked, because it means to know thyself. The word meditation means to become familiar with. So as you become familiar with the thoughts, the behaviors, and the emotions of the old self, you're retiring that old self. As you fire and wire new thoughts and condition the body into a new emotional state, if you do that enough times, it'll begin to become familiar to you. So it's so important, just like a garden. If you're planting a garden, you got to get rid of the weeds. You got to take the plants from the past year and you got to pull them out. The rocks that sift to the top that are like our emotional blocks, they have to be removed. The soil has to be tenderized and broken down. We have to make room to plant a new garden. So primarily, we learn the most about ourselves and others when we're uncomfortable. Because the moment you move into that uncomfortable state, normally a program jumps in. When that program jumps in, it's because the person doesn't want to be in the present moment and engage it consciously. So when you teach people how to do that with a meditative process, it turns out that when they're in their life, they're less likely to emotionally react. They're less likely to be so rigid and believe the thoughts they were thinking. They're more aware of when they go unconscious back into a habit, and that is what starts the process of change. And so we have to unlearn before we relearn. We have to break the habit of the old self before we reinvent a new self. We have to prune synaptic connections and sprout new connections. We have to unfire and unwire and refire and rewire. We have to unmemorize emotions that are stored in the body, and then recondition the body to a new mind and to a new emotion, like deprogram and reprogram. That's the act, and it's a two-step process.
The stronger the emotion you feel from some event in your life, be it a betrayal or a trauma or whatever,
Yes.
the more altered you feel inside of you, the more you pay attention to the cause outside of you. So the brain takes a snapshot. It freezes an image and embosses that pattern neurologically in the brain. That's called a memory. So we create long-term memories from strong emotional events, okay?
So is that true? I just want to understand. Maybe the larger the event in terms of its emotion to you, the stronger of a hold it has over you?
Yeah, well, the more it's embossed in your biology.
Okay.
So some certain people have a strong experience in their life, and it catches all of the brain's attention. So now they think neurologically within the circuits of the past experience, and they feel chemically within the boundaries of those emotions. And so how you think and how you feel creates a state of being. Now here's the problem, that if you don't know how to mediate or control your emotional reaction to that event, and you keep that refractory period of chemicals going on for extended periods of time, so that the event produces a chemical change, and the body needs to return back to homeostasis or balance. But if it can't, then the elongation of that emotional reaction for weeks, say, for days or weeks, is called a mood. So you say, Ed, what's wrong with you? I'm in a mood. Why are you in a mood? Well, this thing happened to me 5 days ago, and I'm having one long emotional reaction. So then what you do is you keep telling the story about it, keep firing and wiring the same circuits, and you keep conditioning the body into the past. So then you wake up in the morning, you look for the emotion. So then now, all of a sudden, you keep it lingering for weeks or months. That's called the temperament. Well, why is he so angry? I don't know. Let's ask him. Why are you so angry? Well, this thing happened to me 8 months ago. I'm having one long emotional reaction. I'm memorizing my emotions. You keep it going on for years on end. That's called a personality trait. So then a person then is memorizing themselves by living in the past. And so then you say to them, well, tell me the story. Now, the latest research on memory says that 50% of what we talk about in our past isn't even the truth. So we make stuff up about the past. In other words, people are reliving a life that they didn't even have just to reaffirm that they can't change, right? So then what's the significance of this? Where you place your attention is where you place your energy. Period. So then the stronger the emotion that you have to some problem or condition or person in your life, the more you're paying attention to them. So they captured your attention. So you're giving your power away to that person, right? Because they're capturing your attention. So then there's an energetic connection to every person, everything in your past, present reality has your energy connected to it. So now, this is the significance. When a person really decides to be defined by a vision of the future instead of the memory of the past, the hardest part about it is all of a sudden becoming conscious and not making the same unconscious choice. So then If you lower the volume to your frustration, to your hatred, to your anger, if you truly knew how to do that, if you lowered the volume to that emotion, you would take your attention off that person, which means you would begin to break those energetic bonds, and now you're taking your power back. 3 types of stress: physical, chemical, and emotional. Physical stress, trauma, accidents, injuries, falls. Chemical stress, toxins, pollutants, heavy metals, blood sugar levels, viruses, bacteria, mold. And then there's emotional stress, which has everything to do with raising kids and second mortgages and single parenting and time, and all of those different elements knock the brain and body out of balance. And the emotional component has always been the challenging one for most people, because you could be in a constant state of fear, and consciously or unconsciously, it doesn't matter the food you eat, it won't matter the type of exercise you do. If you're living in fear, the body is not in any state for growth and repair. So we have to face this one important element, and this is a time now where we have to be greater than our fear.
If you're sitting down and you start thinking about some future worst case scenario that you're conjuring up in your mind, and you begin to feel the emotion of that event, your body doesn't know the difference between the event that's taking place in your world, outer world, and what you're creating by emotion or thought alone. So most people then, they're constantly reaffirming their emotional states. So when it comes time to give up that emotion, they can say, I really want to do it, but really the body is stronger than the mind because it's been conditioned that way. So the servant now has become the master. And the person, all of a sudden, once they step into that unknown, they'd rather feel guilt and suffering because at least they can predict it. Being in the unknown is a scary place for most people because the unknown is uncertain. People say to me, well, I can't predict my future. I'm in the unknown, and I always say the best way to predict your future is to create it. Not from the known, but from the unknown. What thoughts do you want to fire and wire in your brain? What behaviors do you want to demonstrate in one day? The act of rehearsing them mentally, closing your eyes, and rehearsing the action.
Rehearsing the reaction of what you want, or the action of what
the action of what you want. By closing your eyes and mentally rehearsing some action. If you're truly present, the brain does not know the difference between what you're imaging and what you're experiencing in 3D world. So then you begin to install the neurological hardware in your brain to look like the event has already occurred. Now, your brain is no longer a record of the past. Now it's a map to the future. And if you keep doing it, priming it that way, the hardware becomes a software program. And who knows, you just may start acting like a happy person. I'm not the type of guy who sits in my house meditating 24 hours a day and expect things to come to me. I'm a pragmatist. I'm a practical person. I'm going to take value in information, I'm going to apply it and see if I can gain more value from it. So the message is not to sit and meditate and just receive universal love and do nothing else. Because my message is to not disengage in life, but to fully engage in life. That's my message.
Think of your autonomic nervous system as the automatic nervous system. And I've been saying for years that autonomic is synonymous with automatic, and it's that part of our systems, a part of our nervous system that functions behind the scenes of our awareness, and it regulates body temperature and hormones and blood supply and blood sugar levels, and it happens without any of our conscious mind. So in the autonomic nervous system, there are 2 branches. So one is the sympathetic nervous system, and its job is for protection from threats and dangers in our outer environment. And think of the sympathetic nervous system as the gas pedal. And when there's a danger to the gross anatomy of the body by something in our outer world that we can perceive with our senses, this system is switched on automatically. And once it turns on, there's a host of physiological functions that begin to happen automatically. And when that occurs, we're mobilizing all of the body's energy, all of the body's resources for that threat or that danger to deal with it. And when it's switched on, we don't go half in, we go all the way in, because we have to make sure that the body is going to survive in a threat or a danger in the outer environment. And when there's a release of all those adrenal hormones, we're tapping the body's resources And we're mobilizing all of its energy, and pupils dilate, salivary juices shut off, respiratory rate increases, heart rate increases, blood is sent to the extremities, glucose is mobilized, the immune system dials up and then it dials down. And all of these systems switching on and turning on is to be able to allow the body to adapt to some threat in the outer world. And that is the gas pedal. And the sympathetic nervous system, or the fight or flight nervous system, causes us to really do just a few things: to run from the danger, to fight and stay, or to freeze and hide. And those are the primary choices that we have created in evolution. And so when the sympathetic nervous system is switched on, and as we've been saying for a very long time, the short-term effect of the hormones of stress, the body can adapt and return back to balance, and it switches on the other nervous system, that branch of the autonomic nervous system called the parasympathetic nervous system. And think of that nervous system as the brake or the clutch. This is where the body conserves energy. This is where it utilizes nutrients and transports chemicals to cells, and metabolism goes up. And this is a time for growth. This is a time for repair. This is a time for restoration. And there's a delicate balance between the sympathetic nervous system and the parasympathetic nervous system. And so then when you're feeling constant fear, when you're feeling constant anger or aggression, when you're feeling constant pain and suffering, and you're living by the hormones of stress, what was once very adaptive is now very maladaptive, because if stress is knocking your brain and body out of balance, and the stress response is what the body does to return it back to order, if we're living in constant fear, then we are tapping the body's vital resources, and there's no energy for growth, repair, restoration. There's no energy for long-term building projects.
Crossing that river of change from the old self to the new self, there's a neurological, a biological, a chemical, a hormonal, a genetic death of the old self. But if you teach people there's something on the other side, they won't give up on themselves. They'll keep going. So there's enough evidence to encourage people. And you can't tell me you're too old to do this work. You can't tell me you're too sick to do this work. You can't tell me you had a turbulent past, or that you're too overweight or too underweight or too out of shape, or you can't even tell me that you've never meditated before. In fact, some of our greatest scans are people who just have never meditated before, that are not trying to do anything. They just follow instructions. So our community now is beginning to understand that it is possible, and they go all in, not 50% in, not 60% in. If we do a week-long event, we got 1,000 people or 1,500 people, and they are all in. And that when they start getting beyond themselves, that first day or second day, once they start getting beyond themselves and that magic starts to happen, then I have no idea. I can't predict what's going to happen next. And it's usually pretty exciting.
Could you speak about the neurophysiology of forgiveness?
Sure. Think about frozen circuits. Frozen circuits are hardwired circuits. The more profound the insult to the person that is connected to a strong emotion, the more the brain freezes circuitry. The more we think about the experience, the more we fire and wire the circuits in our brain. Yes or no? Yes. And the more we remember the event, the more we produce the emotions that are associated with it, and we're conditioning the brain and body further into the past. Yes or no? Yes. And you keep doing it enough times, it's no longer conscious that you're holding a grudge. It's no longer conscious that you're stuck. It's now you're seeing everybody through the lens of that experience, and everybody's a betrayer. Everybody can't be trusted. Everybody is that same person. You're overlaying the memory of your experience into reality. You're not seeing it the way it is. You're seeing that person wearing the mask of the last person. That's the lens that we're perceiving reality. Are you with me still? And so then anything in your life that becomes remotely close to it based on your limited perception triggers the emotion in the network, and you're back in your past and you're acting like you were when it happened. Are you with me still? Yep. And so then the person says, I'm not that person. And you say, oh, no, I know. I just had this event in my past and I'm sorry. And then it's excusable, but then here it happens again. And there's nothing wrong with this. We all do it. It's just, how do we overcome it? So then you're sitting and doing the work, and you're moving energy up those centers. You're releasing the life force into your brain. You are blessing those centers and taking a scoop and moving it all the way up and releasing it all the way up into the field. You're opening the channel. You're unfolding as nobody, no one, no thing, no where, and no time, and the identity and the personality is gone. Energy's going to move. It's got to. It's going to follow the path. You're opening your heart. Once it gets to your heart, it's going to make its way all the way up. And when you feel love and compassion, when you feel true kindness and care, it's hard to hold a grudge. Are you with me still? Yes. So then from a quantum physics point of view, you have that person always in the back of your mind, right? You have the event and the memory rolling around back there because the very thing that you don't want to have happen, you're already preparing for emotionally. Are you with me still? Yep. So then from a quantum perspective, you are actually, as a creator of reality, holding yourself hostage because of that person. And you are holding them hostage because of that experience. And you have an energetic bond that's connecting you to them. And you're sharing the same energy. And so then you're using each other to reaffirm whatever that energetic agreement is. Are you with me still? So then when you forgive someone, it's because there's been a strong change in your emotional state. Because the emotion is what's keeping you energetically bound to them or to more than one person. And so then once you start lowering the volume to that emotion and the body starts liberating energy, and you're calling your energy back to you, because the lower the volume of the emotion, the less you're going to pay attention to that person, there comes a moment where there's a snap, there's a release, the energy is broken. And once it's broken now, all of a sudden you free yourself. And you free them. And this has happened to me in my life. The people show up 10 years later, completely changed and so humble and so asking for forgiveness just because they had transformed, and I let them go. So then forgiveness from a quantum perspective and a neurophysiological perspective is just taking your attention off them. That's all it is. And when you start getting happy with yourself and you start feeling those elevated emotions because you're striving for that, you wouldn't trade this for the grudge you were holding because this feels too good. Are you with me still? Now, once that heart opens up and you start having energy in the center and it's releasing 1,300 to 1,400 different chemicals that begin to restore and regenerate the body, the body start getting a lift of energy. Once it makes its here, now you're going to see that track sending in energy to the brain. The heart acts as an amplifier to boost the brain. Are you with me still? Yep. So then once the energy starts making its way into the brain, once the heart starts to open, we've measured this with our students. They have oxytocin levels rise. Once you start feeling oxytocin, when you feel more love, then you feel the grudge. So then you think, why would I want to give this up for that person? That's called forgiveness. You don't have to try to do it. It just is a side effect of your personal transformation. And oxytocin then, when it's released, rushes right into the amygdala, the survival center of the brain, and the research is outstanding. And the first thing it does is it fits in the same receptor sites as fear, and it lowers the volume to fear and anxiety. It shuts the lights out for aggression and anger and hostility, and it cools the circuits off for suffering and pain, and the only thing you can feel is a love for life. And that's when you're free. Now, the practice of forgiveness, matter to matter, you can do it, but it takes a long time and a lot of work. And then you forgive, and then you're like, I don't want to forgive him. Halfway forgive him. And just never really authentic forgiveness. Do you understand? And there was a woman that came to our work, and she was raped by 4 men when she was a teenager, and it was abusive. And she had severe night terrors, severe anxiety and panic attacks. She had cyclic mood problems. She had been to every single doctor, every single healer, every single alternative practitioner. Nothing changed it. She came to our event in Tacoma, Washington. And she hit that point where she became everybody, everyone, everything, everywhere, every time, every place. She became the oneness. And that frequency had a message for her, and it said, and she was in incredible bliss when this happened. I sent 4 angels disguised as rapists for this moment. And that was the end of her terrors. That was the end of her night. She couldn't have a relationship. She could not live with anybody. She was isolated. One moment, the divine stepped in and gave her the signal. That was carrying a very specific message, and she got the download, not just the thought. She got the energy move right through her body, and she saw the whole thing. And that moment is what she was waiting for. That's what the soul was waiting for. Now she's healed, she's healthy, she's happy, and she's on with a new life. She's born again. My mother would love this. She's born again in the same life, reborn in the same life. Didn't pass through a birth canal for it. She just was born again in the same life. She got a new lease in one instant. That energy was carrying a message, and it made its way all the way into the body, and the bliss and the joy and the gratitude and the love that she felt, and the message that was carried made total sense to her. She's free. One instant. To me, that's true forgiveness. That's the divine having its way with you.
Most people are waiting for their life to change.
Yes.
So they can feel gratitude, to feel abundance, to feel whole. That's the old model of cause and effect, So if you're living with emptiness, you're living with lack, you're living with pain, most people have been conditioned that something out there has to take away this emptiness or feeling inside of them. But if you believe that you're creating your life and you're living by lack, well, lack isn't going to create abundance, right? So then it makes sense then that you don't really actually create wealth. You generate wealth. You generate abundance. So the moment you start teaching your body emotionally what that future is going to feel like before it's made manifest, well, your body, as the unconscious mind, believes it's living in that future in the present moment. Now, it's a scientific fact that it's the environment that signals the gene, okay? The end product from an experience in the environment is an emotion. So when you begin to embrace an elevated emotion, you're beginning to signal the gene ahead of the environment. What's the importance of that? Well, genes make proteins, and proteins are responsible for the structure and the function of your body. And the expression of proteins is the expression of life. So by you creating an elevated emotion and teaching your body what that future will feel like before it's made manifest, your body's starting to live in that future reality in the present moment. Now here's the key. If you were able to become familiar with gratitude, become familiar with wholeness, become familiar with abundance, to become familiar with freedom, and you're able to generate those chemicals every single day, more than likely you would be walking around feeling like your future has already happened, and you would no longer be looking for it to happen. You would already feel like it has happened. Now, what is the importance of that? Well, you're literally becoming somebody else. Yes. So you're leaving your lack, you're leaving your guilt, you're leaving your emptiness behind. Your personality, literally, Ed, is made up of how you think, how you act, and how you feel. And how you think, how you act, and how you feel is your personality, and your personality is intimately connected to your personal reality, your life. So then if you want to change your life,
your personal reality, you got to change your personality. And here we go again. You got to start becoming conscious of your unconscious thoughts. You got to start noticing how you act, how you speak. You got to pay attention to how you're feeling. Some people would live in guilt their whole entire life and don't even know it's guilt because at least it feels like them. So then when you start doing that, you begin to objectify your subjective self. So then when you begin to make small changes, back to thought, a new thought should lead to a new choice. A new choice should lead to a new behavior. A new behavior should create a new experience, and a new experience should create a new emotion.
Yes.
And that new emotion is teaching your body chemically to understand what your mind has intellectually understood. Now your body is embodying the truth.
I believe in human possibility, human potential, and I think that one of our biggest limiting beliefs is the belief of how limited we really are. And so my interest is to give people the science to begin to understand how powerful they really are. And I think that science really is the language that does that really well. And the new sciences like quantum physics and neuroplasticity, neuroscience, neuroendocrinology, psychoneuroimmunology, the mind-body connection, epigenetics, all of those sciences point the finger at possibilities. So I want to create a language for people from a philosophical or theoretical standpoint for them to begin to understand what's possible. But then I want to be able to have those people begin to wire that information in their brain completely, because learning is making new connections, right, in the brain. But remembering is maintaining and sustaining those connections. And it's so much easier to lose our vision than to remember it, right? So then we have to begin to hardwire the brain or install the neurological hardware in preparation for an experience. So the more people understand what they're doing and why, then the how gets easier. So I want to then set up the conditions in an environment, in a workshop where people can begin to apply or personalize what they learn so that they can have an experience. An experience then further enriches the brain. But the prize of an experience is an emotion. And once you start feeling unlimited, once you start feeling abundant, once you start feeling worthy, now you're teaching your body chemically to understand what your mind has intellectually understood. So knowledge is for the mind and experiences for the body, and people begin to embody the truth of that philosophy. Now, if they can repeat it over and over again, it'll become innate in them. It'll become natural, second nature, it'll become easy. They'll begin to master that philosophy. So I want people to begin to understand that thoughts are very powerful. Feelings drive our thoughts, and that they can begin to create a better life for themselves once they understand some of these principles. Overcoming the old self allows us to become somebody else. And there is that period of transition. I call it the void, where there's just not a lot happening. And you just got to be able to keep going and continuously get to the end of your belief where most people stop. I just had a fabulous conversation with someone this weekend. Broke through to the other side, and now there's so much magic happening around this person. But she's worthy now to receive it. And that is the key, because the universe only gives us what we think we're worthy of receiving. So we got to become initiated into this and understand that thousands of years of programming that says that we have to change things matter to matter, in three-dimensional reality. And it will take time, but to begin to connect to that resource called the quantum field and create from the field instead of from matter, there's a lot of unlearning that has to go on. I think this is a time in history where it's not enough to know. This is a time in history to know how. And if you rewind the tape 10 years ago, information was the thing that stimulated thought, stimulated new ideas. And as we learn new things, we make new connections in our brains. So as we begin to add new stitches into that three-dimensional tapestry in our mind, we're beginning to cause our mind to function in new ways. But the key then is to apply it, to personalize it, to do something with it. And 10 years ago, when I got in front of an audience and talked about the application, nobody wanted to step outside that philosophical, theoretical, intellectual realm, right? Because doing something means you're going to have to change something about yourself.
Painful.
Yeah, you're going to get uncomfortable, right? And I think we're in an age of information. And in an age of information, ignorance is a choice. And because of technology, we have access to so much content.
And information creates awareness. And awareness is consciousness. And you can't have consciousness without energy. They work together. So there's an energetic change, I think, that's taking place in the world right now where people are so informed that old models, old paradigms are beginning to break down, whether it's the medical model or the religious model, the educational model, journalism, the economy, politics. It's all beginning to come to the surface because something else has to come out. And I think that one of the things that people are realizing is that you don't have to be a Buddhist monk to do this or a nun with 40 years of devotion. You just got to understand the formula. And just like any skill or anything you learn, you got to go from thinking to doing to being. You got to take knowledge, you create the experience, and if you keep doing it over and over again, you start getting a skill or you start getting wise about how to do it. And you know that you know how to do it. If we teach a person then how to trade that frustration or that hatred for an elevated emotion, and they'll say, yeah, but it was my ex's fault, or I got betrayed by my partner in business. Yeah, we know that. Okay, so let's take your partner in business or take your ex, let's duct tape them, put them in a cannon and shoot them to the moon. Now what are you going to do? Sooner or later, you got to reckon with yourself and change, right? So then teach a person then how to trade that emotion for an elevated emotion. Now,
trade the emotion for an elevated emotion.
Right. So you're going to give that up and you're going to practice feeling gratitude as an example.
Yes.
And the person says, well, I can't feel gratitude. And I say, absolutely you can, because you don't practice feeling it. You practice spending most of your time feeling hatred and frustration. So now it's going to take a little time to cause that heart of you to bloom, or your heart of yours to bloom. Once they're able to feel even the smallest measure of gratitude, where they start feeling appreciation, thankfulness. Gratitude, it's emotional signature. When you get something, when you're receiving something, when something has happened to you, or when something is happening to you, you say thank you because you're receiving something. So the emotional signature of gratitude means the event has already happened or it's happening to you. So the moment you open your heart and you feel gratitude, well, that emotion then is telling the body that the experience has already occurred. And the thought then can make it into the body because it's consistent with the thought. So now you're beginning to program the autonomic nervous system into a very specific destiny. You got to maintain that modified state of mind and body your entire day, independent of the conditions in your outer environment, independent of your body's cravings of those emotions and habituations, and independent from time. And if you can, get ready. Because something weird or unusual, some synchronicity, some coincidence, some opportunity is going to land in your lap. And you didn't have to go and get it.
Yes.
It came to you. Now you're the vortex of creation. So if you say to me, well, I was feeling gratitude, but then there was traffic, or my coworker sent me a nasty email, then I would say, oh my God, you mean you're allowing your environment, your outer environment, to control how you feel and think? You're back to the unconscious program that you're the victim to your life.
You got it.
But when you start producing those outcomes in your life, you're going to pay attention to what you did inside of you, and you're going to believe more that you're the creator of your life and less of the victim of your life. I think we've been hypnotized and conditioned into becoming materialists. I think that we define reality with our senses, and I think that is one of the biggest delusions. So the fundamental question is, can you believe in a future that you can't see or experience with your senses yet, but you've thought about enough times in your mind that your brain has literally changed to look like the event has already occurred? Now, the latest research in plasticity says that's absolutely possible. And can you select a new possibility in the quantum field and begin to emotionally embrace that future every single day to such a degree that your body, as the unconscious mind, the objective mind, does not know the difference between the experience in your life that's creating the emotion and the emotion that you're fabricating by thought alone, to the degree that you begin to signal new genes in new ways to change your body to look like the experience has already happened. Now, the latest research in epigenetics says it's absolutely possible. Now, think about this. Every day, installing the circuitry, every day conditioning the body into the emotion of the future, that your body begins to change to look like it's already happened. Now, this is where it gets fun, because now you no longer have to go anywhere to get it. Now it begins to come to you. You become the vortex or the magnet to your destiny. So then people who come out of their meditation and they say, well, I just focused on my wealth. Why isn't it there? Well, you're not that good. If you're asking why isn't it there, you're back to the old person again. Stay in that state for an extended period of time as an experiment, as the scientist in your life, to keep your energy connected to the dream of your future. And then see what kind of effects begin to take place without moving into impatience, without moving into frustration, without starting to analyze why it hasn't happened or when. That is the trap of defining reality with your senses. So you have the thought of your future and you don't see it, then you experience separation. But people who are practicing this work, they have the thought of their future and they feel the emotion of their future. They're still connected to it, right? So that takes practice. And it's just learning, like hitting a golf ball, hitting a tennis ball, dancing the salsa, crocheting, whatever it is. You gotta start out staying real conscious and learning. And then you get good at it and it gets to be instrumental. It gets to be fun. And that's what I want for everybody, that the act of creation should be a blissful, playful, ecstatic, loose, free process. And so I love the idea of people taking time out of their lives to prove to themselves that if they're defined by the vision of the future, then they're not living by the memories of the past. And that's where the unknown exists. So many people, the unknown is a scary place. So they don't see that future because they're used to seeing that future with evidence, with their senses. And you have to be able to get beyond that and stay in the unknown, stay in that discomfort, and then in that moment to begin to self-regulate. Like, oh, I'm starting to feel a little anxiety. Ooh, I'm starting to feel a little frustration. That's the defining moment where your body's going back to the past, because emotions are a record of the past. Or you go into routine again. So you catch yourself. It's a victory. And if you keep catching yourself, those victories add up. And it's not so much about your wealth or your health or your freedom or your new relationship. It's actually about who you become. We have research to show that 60 days of meditation, 5 days a week, will lengthen your life. The telomeres, the little shoestrings on the end of your DNA, get longer. That means your biological age is changing. So we have the evidence now to show people what's possible. We have brain scans that are so outside of normal that when neuroscientists see them, they're blown away, because the amount of energy that's in the brain during this transcendental moment is hundreds of times outside of normal.
Wow.
I mean, you can't make your brain do that. Something is happening to you, and that person's having a transcendental moment. And we now know that we can predict it, and we now know that we can induce it. So then there's the evidence there. I think, everything starts with a thought. I mean, everything that you do in your life, you have to have a thought before you initiate an action, right? So if you believe that your thoughts have something to do with your destiny, like any great leader in history understands that, the first thing you have to do is you have to decide, are you going to be defined by a vision of the future, or are you going to live by the memories of the past? So I'll give you an example. Most people wake up in the morning and your brain is a record of the past. It's an artifact of everything you've learned and experienced to this moment, right? It's a memory bank. So most people wake up in the morning and they start thinking about their problems, and those problems are connected to certain people and things at certain times and places. And the moment they start turning on those circuits, those memories are actually causing them to think in the past. Every single one of those memories has an emotion associated with them, and emotions are the end product of past experiences. So then the moment they recall the event, or they recall some problem in their life, they start feeling unhappy, they start feeling discouraged, they start feeling anxious. Now, thoughts are the language of the brain, and feelings are the language of the body, and how you think and how you feel creates your state of being. So we could say then, most people's entire state of being when they start their day is in the familiar past. Well, if you live in the familiar past, then it makes sense you're going to create the predictable future. So what happens for most people is they get stuck in their biology. So think about this. Your body is your unconscious mind. It doesn't know the difference between an experience in your life that creates an emotion and an emotion that you can create by thought alone.
So if you're living by the same emotion every single day, and those emotions are influencing your thoughts, and you can't think greater than how you feel, or feelings have become the means of thinking, you're thinking in the past. Your lens of the future is going to be colored by the past, so you can't see possibilities. So most people like to wait for crisis or disease or diagnosis before they wake up enough to see. Well, the challenge is that biology tends to be redundant. So if you keep thinking the same thoughts, and those thoughts begin to fire certain circuits in your brain, the nerve cells that wire together, so all of a sudden you start getting hardwired, and those are the thoughts that you can think the easiest. At the same time, those thoughts produce chemicals called emotions, and the next thing you know, your body gets accustomed to living by the same emotions, and it could be guilt, it could be unhappiness, it could be pain, but at least it's familiar to you, at least you can predict it. So some people would rather cling to the familiar than take a chance in possibilities. So for most people then, they say, well, I don't really see how my thoughts have anything to do with my destiny. Well, that's because 95% of those thoughts are subconscious programs, right? So you're not even conscious that you think those thoughts. So the first step to change is starting to think about what you've been thinking about and change it. And then when you begin to observe those thoughts, you're no longer the program, you're the consciousness observing the program.
Just simply by being an observer of your thoughts.
Right, so most people though, when you do that, when you decide to really take a look, it's like lighting a match in a dark place. So you feel uncomfortable. So it's easier to turn on your TV, it's easier to play with your cell phone, to distract yourself from those feelings. Well, when you understand that change really requires becoming uncomfortable to a certain degree, and that's normal, that you're leaving the known and you're stepping into the unknown, then it begs the question, what thoughts do you want to fire and wire in your brain? Because your attention on those thoughts begins to reorganize circuitry, remold the brain. So then when you're feeling gratitude and your heart is open, you're broadcasting energy into the field. Now, a frequency. You lay the intent of the thought of your health or your wealth. That frequency can carry the thought of your wealth. It can carry the thought of your health. If you're suffering, suffering does not carry, that energy does not carry the thought of your wealth. It carries a different set of thoughts. So then we're teaching people how to self-regulate, because if you're going to believe in that future that you're imagining with all of your heart, it better be open and activated. And you better know how to self-regulate. And you have to know the moment you disconnect from the energy of your future because of some circumstance in your life and you lose that feeling, if you're practicing it on a daily basis with your eyes closed, then the next level is to be able to open your eyes and do it right in the moment and be able to self-regulate and change the frustration from some experience in your life back to the energy of your future. Now, that requires great awareness and great effort. But if you have a community of people that are practicing this on a daily basis, and they're connected to their future because that's where their mind is, they begin to want the future more than the emotions of the past. So we've done enough measurements now, Louis, to know that we can teach people how to do that, and we have evidence that people can sustain it for 45 minutes to an hour. It's a skill now. They know that they know how to do it. So now they have brain coherence and heart coherence. Well, once the heart begins to become orderly and coherent, it acts as an amplifier and it drives energy to the brain. So now the brain is getting more energy once the heart is open, and then you're thinking a different set of thoughts. And those thoughts produce different chemicals for you to feel more of that. And here comes nitric oxide from oxytocin, and then all of a sudden your heart literally starts to swell. It literally begins to open up, and there's more energy going there, and now you're coming from a different level of mind. You have to really begin to mentally rehearse. Like, so you ask yourself at the end of your day, I do this every day. How'd I do? How'd I do today, bro? How'd you do? Did you do good? Where'd you fall from grace? What was it that caused you to go unconscious for the rest of the day? Like, what was that moment? Now, if you're a student of life, you'll begin to contemplate, well, it was that person that said that thing, then I reacted, or I got this email, or things didn't go my way, and I started feeling angry or frustrated or fearful. The next time that happens,
How could I evolve my experience? Now, you may have to search for some answers of the best model to build, or you may actually have a long contemplation and start to go, God, the next time that happens, I think I'm going to do this, or I'm going to do that, or I'm going to plan my behaviors. And the act of closing your eyes and rehearsing what you're going to do begins to install the neurological hardware in your brain to look like you already did it. Now the brain is no longer a record of the past. Now it's a map to the future. And if you keep installing that hardware, the hardware will become a software program, which means you'll just start acting like a happy person. Why? There's no magic there. You installed the circuitry. So that's more important than the news.
Right.
It's more important than answering any email or any text. It's more important than talking about your past or some dinner. If you can begin to just think about how you're going to do it differently, that's the building process neurologically already. So now you have to get conscious in order to do that. And it takes some time. That means you got to shut your cell phone off. You got to close your door. You got to take a break from everything out there and begin to practice. And so by experience, then you start noticing, oh, here it comes. Here comes the frustration. Or here comes the fear. And now we've given people the tools to be able to self-regulate, to create brain and heart coherence. And so you see people say, excuse me 1 minute, I just need a minute. They take some breaths, they get back in, they connect to the energy of their future. This is incidental compared to where they're going. So they don't fall from grace. They don't allow their energy to drop. And so, in the beginning, it takes a lot because it takes a lot of energy and awareness to stay conscious and not go unconscious. But if you're persistent and you're determined and you're sincere, you begin to figure it out. You begin to say, I am not going to give my power away to that person or that circumstance when I can use it to heal or to create a new future. And so people then won't excuse themselves and say, I had a hard day yesterday, I had a fight with my coworker or my ex, and I don't feel like doing the work. Well, that's the time to get back on the horse.
Yeah.
Because it's all of those times that we self-correct. Those are the most valuable moments to us. People who've had profoundly transcendental experiences where we say got lit up, they connected, and their brain goes into very, very high coherent states and super gamma patterns that are way outside of normal, and they have a transcendental download or connection that's mystical. They look back at their entire life. They don't want to change one thing in their past because it got them to that moment. That's the moment the past no longer exists. Now, by the same means, they look back at their past and they see all those tough moments where they overcame themselves and they fall in love with that person. They don't look at the good meditations or the things that went well. They know that it was those moments that got them to this moment. And I think then that's when they begin to understand that all of the hard work, all the effort in who we become makes, no one can take that away from us. So then once we arrive at that level and we experience whatever the dream is or whatever we create, then the next thing is do it until you fully enjoy it. And then when it gets boring or predictable, let's go again. Let's do something else. Our research shows that when you get a community of people together, and they begin to open their hearts and they have the intent for the greatest good for people that they know or people that they could focus on, that our research shows that you can actually affect another person's autonomic nervous system when you move into heart coherence in a very non-local way. Well, what's the significance of that? Well, we have an amazing community. And our community is connected by these elevated emotions. Those other emotions of survival create separation. But we work to open our hearts and to feel connected. We can begin to affect people in a very non-local way. In other words, everybody else's hearts go into coherence at the exact same time. You, by opening your heart, strengthen your connection to this community. You strengthen the connection to the people that you relate with in your lives. When you move into that state, you begin to affect everybody else. The majority of our thoughts and feelings are connected to our sexuality
to our victimization, our guilt, our suffering, our shame, our unworthiness, our self-doubt, or our importance, our control, our fear, our anger, our frustration, our hatred, our judgment. Those are the first three hormonal centers in the body. And those first three centers have everything to do with survival. And those centers are energy consumers. Orgasm, digestion, stress is a lot of energy that we're drawing from our very vital life force, our resource of light and information, and we're turning it into chemistry, and we're literally robbing the body's energy, right? So then living like that for the short term is okay, because the body can move back to homeostasis, it can restore itself, but when we're overdoing that consistently, then there's no energy for growth and repair, because you're living constantly in survival. So again, you can eat all the right food, you can do all the right things, but if you're living in anxiety and fear and you're viewing your world from the worst case scenario that could possibly happen, because that's what you do in survival, there's no energy for growth and repair. There's no energy for healing. So the majority of our thoughts are signaling certain circuits in the brain that signal another part of the brain, the limbic brain, to make what's called a neuropeptide. Neuropeptides are chemical messengers that signal hormonal centers. So now you're taking thought and you're storing it as energy in these energy centers. And if you're living in survival, why would you open your heart? I mean, it's just not a time to open your heart. I mean, if you're getting chased by T-Rex, it's not a time to meditate. It's not a time to learn. It's not a time to connect. It's not a time to communicate. It's not a time to sit down and go within. It's not a time to be vulnerable. It's time to run, fight, or hide. And so,
is that why we're this way? I've never asked you this before. Is this some? I don't think you believe this, but I just want to understand. Is this some sort of genetic disposition that's been passed down to us since we've been chased by T-Rex?
I think so. I think survival has been very adaptive. Like, because if you're being chased by T-Rex, you don't run up to T-Rex and say, "Oh, cute little dinosaur, let me pet you." That's not adaptive. The fear is adaptive. You run from the unknown. You run from challenges, right? So if you're living in survival, there's better chances of surviving if you run from the unknown. And by the way, when you're living in survival at the infinite potentials in the quantum field, you'll select the worst case scenario in your mind. And you'll begin to emotionally prepare yourself for the worst case scenario, because you have better chances of surviving.
There you go.
If you prepare for the worst, right?
There you
so
go.
people spend their whole life thinking about the worst thing and emotionally embracing it. Well, you take a thought and emotion, or an image and an emotion, you're branding or conditioning your body into what? Anxiety, into fear. So then you keep doing that over and over again, the body becomes the mind of fear. And whether you think you can control it or not, you're going to have a panic attack. And the panic attack is the body saying, "You've conditioned me this way. Try as you may with your conscious mind to control it." You programmed it subconsciously. Then you start worrying about the next panic attack, and it's that very anticipation that keeps the person on the hamster wheel, right?
And robs them of all of this energy as well.
They're absolutely so they don't believe in possibility when they're living in that state, because in survival, it's not a time to create. All the blood flow is going to the hindbrain and away from the forebrain. There's no physiology really for a person to begin to create a new future. So think about it. So then 70% of the time, people in the world are living anticipating the next moment based on their past moment. And so they're laying reality down moment by moment with the next known, the next predictable moment. And so the hormones of stress endorse the senses. Our senses become heightened when we're under stress, and we become materialists. We narrow our focus on the danger. So then you're focusing on matter, you're focusing on the material world, and when you do that, you put all your attention, the arousal of the stress hormones puts all your attention on your body. If you're being chased by T-Rex, you better be paying attention to your body.
If the person's doing the vision board and they're saying, when I get my new car, I get my new house, I get my new relationship, then I'm going to feel so great. Well, then they're back to the program, waiting for it to happen for them to feel the emotion. They're believing their outer world has to change in order for them to feel better. There's no effect of drawing the experience to you with that way. So the person has to use those tools to get them into the emotional state for them to feel like it's already happened. Now think about this. If you get up from a creative process and you feel grateful You feel a love for life. You feel a joy for existence. You feel a passion for the moment. You will not be looking for your future because you'll feel like it's already happened. It's the moment that we start feeling those self-limiting emotions, that we feel separation, and then we start looking for it again. And well, then if you're waiting, you're not creating, you're in separation again. So then whatever it takes for you to move into a state of being. And what is a state of being? Thoughts are the vocabulary of the brain. Feelings are the vocabulary of your body. How you think and how you feel creates your state of being. So then if you wake up in the morning and you come back to your senses with a clean slate and you say, I don't feel anything, and you say, well, let me start thinking about all the problems in my life. Well, all those problems are connected to different people or different objects or things at different times and places. The moment you remember your problems, a memory is a record of the past. You're thinking in the past. Every one of those problems has an emotion associated with them. So all of a sudden you start feeling unhappy, you start feeling bitter, you start feeling frustrated. So now your body's in the past. So then most people then create a state of being that's connected to their past. And if they're in the familiar past, then they are going to crave the predictable future and they're going to fall back into routine. So then we want people then to get very clear on that vision of their future, however they do it, and begin to combine that clear intention with an elevated emotion. And the stronger the emotion they feel from the vision they're creating, the more altered they feel inside of them, the more they're going to pay attention to the pictures in their mind. And now they're remembering their future. And biologically, it's exactly the same as remembering your past. In fact, if you're not being defined by a vision in the future, it means you're making your past more real than your future. You're falling in love with your past. You're more in love with your past than you are with your future. That you're believing in your past more than you're believing in your future. When you get to that moment where you have that feeling, that's your compass, because that feeling is going to drive your behaviors. It's going to drive more of those thoughts. And when you feel that feeling and it's visceral, no person, no thing, no experience will stand in the way between you and that vision. And you will be initiated by the universe into wealth. You will be initiated into health. You'll be initiated into freedom. Those people, all those people that have healed themselves of all those different health conditions, they are so humble and so happy, and they feel so great that they would never trade this feeling because of what you thought of them. They've left that program behind a long time ago. They actually don't care how you think of them. They actually are so happy with themselves that they're no longer dependent on anything outside of them. Now, I think that's a really important moment, because that's the moment we give people permission in our lives to do the same, right? And I think that more and more people are beginning to figure that out. One of the things about the global pandemic that I said to my staff and to my family the moment I heard how the circumstances in the world changed, I just said I refuse to be a victim to these circumstances. So a victim consciousness is when we allow something in our outer environment to control the way we feel and think. So if I say to you, Jay, why are you so upset today? And you said, oh, it's because of this person or circumstance. What you're really saying is something in my outer environment, some person or some condition is controlling the way I think and feel. Now, that's not the truth. That's just a response, right? So anything that controls our thoughts and feelings causes us to be victim to those things. And the stronger the emotion we feel to some circumstance in our life, the more we pay attention to it. And where we place our attention is where we place our energy. So we're giving our life force, we're giving our power away to that circumstance. And so I just made up my mind that it was a great opportunity to get into the cocoon. We've done an experiment, just 10 minutes a day, 3 times a day with 120 people, trading resentment, frustration, fear for gratitude, appreciation, and thankfulness, measuring their immune response. The chemical immunoglobulin A, your primary defense against bacteria and viruses, the best flu shot you'll ever get, lives innately within you. Turns out when you're frustrated, when you're impatient, when you're fearful, the immune system dials down because you're an emergency. It's that all your energy is going for some threat in your outer world. There's no energy in your inner world for growth and repair. But how do you turn that around? So then as people begin to open their heart, can that chemical begin to elevate. 4 days, 50% change in the 120 people. Their IgA levels went up 50% in 4 days.
Wow.
That's your body's immune system is now upregulating genes that are making proteins and immunoglobulins and antibodies that you don't need a flu shot. In other words, your inner state is greater than your outer world. So then just by doing that, we now know that your immune system is going to get stronger by the same means. Take 120 people or 50 people and measure 7,500 gene regulations. Okay? In 4 days, 2 genes that suppress cancer growth and tumors are activated and upregulated. The genes that stimulate stem cells to go to damaged tissues and repair them, upregulated. The gene for oxidative balance is upregulated. Anti-cancer, anti-aging, anti-heart disease, anti-stroke, anti-neurodegenerative, anti-inflammatory, antimicrobial. Just your body's naturally doing this. The gene for neurogenesis, the growth of new neurons in response to novel experiences and learning. This is 4 days. The gene switches on. The gene for more balance in the pituitary and the pancreas. The gene for the microtubules of the cells, the little fibers that respond to energy and frequency. So in 4 days, we now know that you can change your genetic destiny if you just practice the inner work.
If you think about this, your senses plug you into your external environment. Everything you're seeing or smelling or tasting or feeling or hearing, all of your 5 senses are affecting your brain. So if you're waking up in the morning and you're going through the same routine behaviors as you did the day before, and you're not in the process of being defined by a vision of the future, then you're for the most part left with the old hardware in your brain from the past. As a matter of fact, your brain is organized to reflect everything you know from the past. So as people wake up and they begin to pay attention to their body, they start to look around in their environment, they start to do typical things, it's the external environment that's turning on different circuits in their brain, causing them to think equal to their environment. And if you have the idea that your thoughts have something to do with your destiny, as long as you're thinking equal to your environment, you keep creating the same reality over and over again. So to change is to think greater than your environment, to think greater than the circumstances in your world, to think greater than the conditions in your life. And I think every great person in history understood this. They were defined by a vision that was much bigger than them.
I think one of the challenges I think many people have is really the discernment of information. It's really difficult to know what's the truth anymore, just because information is so accessible. And I used to say that in an age of information, ignorance is a choice. And now we have to confront a whole nother level, and that is the information that we're getting. Is it actually supporting us, or is it something that really is an incentive to cause us to make choices? So for me, I think the biggest challenge has been just really an awakening to what kind of information I want to expose myself to. And I think it's now more than ever a challenge for a lot of people in the world. We have research to show that 60 days of meditation, 5 days a week, will lengthen your life. The telomeres, the little shoestrings on the end of your DNA, get longer. That means your biological age is changing. So we have the evidence now to show people what's possible. We have brain scans that are so outside of normal that when neuroscientists see them, they're blown away, because the amount of energy that's in the brain during this transcendental moment is hundreds of times outside of normal.
Wow.
I mean, you can't make your brain do that. Something is happening to you, and that person's having a transcendental moment. And we now know that we can predict it, and we now know that we can induce it. So then there's the evidence there. Then you take our community and you see people with stage 4 cancer, with Parkinson's disease, with myasthenia gravis, with lupus, with MS, with brain injuries, with rare genetic disorders, with vertigo, tinnitus, kidney failure, all kinds of health conditions, come to a week-long event, and then at the end of that event, they make significant strides in getting beyond the emotions of the past. Now think about this. The science says that the environment signals the gene. That's epigenetics. The end product of an experience in the environment is an emotion. So as long as you're living by the same emotion every single day, you're signaling the same gene in the same way. And if that gene is related to a survival emotion, a stress hormone, then you're down-regulating the gene and you're creating disease. So when the person trades that emotion and really breaks free from the chains of their past, and now they're feeling an elevated emotion, well, now they're dialing down the gene for MS, and they're upregulating the gene for health and balance. And so the person, you'll say to them, where's the disease? Well, I'm not the same person. I'm not the, and the side effect of that is a transformation and healing. So the funny thing about it is the person who has the healing is not talking about the healing. Whether it's blind people seeing, deaf people hearing, we have crazy evidence now. What they're talking about is how amazing they feel because they're refreshed. They got a new lease on life. Yeah. And so now we have evidence in our research, and that silences the critic to show that what's possible for people. If you're sitting in a meditation and your body's throwing the kitchen sink at you and saying, Ed, you're a loser, you're never going to change, this is too hard, why don't you quit? And you're aware that that's your body doing that, and you say to your body, we're going to sit here and we're going to sit in this fire and I'm going to keep applying the formula, and your brain starts running to all the emails you have to do, and you become aware of that and you return back to the present moment, and you tell the body it's no longer the mind, that you're the mind. Now your will is getting greater than that program, and there's a liberation of energy, and every time you do that, that's a victory. And you teach people.
Every time you do that, that's a victory. When your mind tells the body, I'm in charge.
When you say to your, when you want to get up and you want to quit, and you go, oh, no, that's my body, bring it back. Okay. And now you're taming the animal. The body is the animal, and you're like a dog, you sit. And if you keep doing this, you're climbing on top, and the body finally acquiesces. It finally says, I'm not going anywhere. And then boom, there's this liberation of energy. What's the side effect? Joy. Person's heart just automatically opens up, and every time they do that, those victories add up. There's no such thing as a bad meditation. There's only overcoming yourself. And when you sit in the fire and you work with that, people say to me, why do you meditate every morning? I say, because if I can overcome myself in the morning, the rest of my day is easy. It's easy. Not true? Because that's what it's about. You master yourself, you master your life. And so then all the chatter in your head that you listen to all day long, that is called the default mode network in the brain. Our research shows that shuts off. Not just shuts off during the meditation, it stays shut off for the rest of the day. So the critic in your head that's telling you this will never happen, you don't have enough time, there's no voice there. So you just have a clear flow on where you're going, and you trust yourself more.
Look, I mean, we're in a convenience-based society. I mean, if you lose your internet connection or your cell phone doesn't do what it's supposed to, people get angry. Like, that's 20 seconds, right? So here you are creating something out of nothing, and you don't have the patience. Well, that has to come out, because a very, very masterful person who is abundant had to own impatience. So then never make it be about the end result. Make it be about effort. Every day you're overcoming. Every day you're out of the bleachers and you're on the field and you're giving it your all and you're practicing, keeping your energy up greater than your habits in your body or the emotional conditioning of your body, greater than any circumstance in your environment, and sustaining it for an extended period of time. And then all of a sudden, when you're connected to the energy of your future, and you know what that feels like, you will know the moment you return back to the energy of your past. And if you tell me it's because of your boss or your coworker or your ex, I'm going to say, you're back to the unconscious program that you're the victim of your life, right? Absolutely. So then it takes some unlearning, and the unlearning process is the most important process, because once you do that, you're clearing out room for the next creation to be easier, and the next one to be easier, because you starting to understand the formula a little better. And you start saying, I'm not going to take that personally, or I'm not going to react, or I'm not going to go back to that person again. I'm just going to self-regulate again. You only need a few experiences to know that this is the truth. And then you start managing your attention, and you manage your energy a lot better. And I think that I always say, I don't care that you fall off the horse. I just care when you get back on, right? Because some people fall off and then they have to go into guilt and analysis, and they take weeks. And well, you could have just said, I fell off. Let me just get back on and keep going here. Every time we have a thought, we make a chemical. And if you have an unlimited thought, you will feel unlimited. And if you have a self-depreciating thought, you'll feel unworthy. And your brain instantaneously fires circuits that signal another part of the brain to release peptides or chemical messengers that signal hormonal centers. And when we get that arousal from the thought that we think, those thoughts sometimes weaken, the response weakens the physical body. So turns out that the emotions that are created from the thoughts are the signaling mechanisms of the body. Thoughts are the language of the brain, and feelings are the language of the body. And how we think and how we feel creates our state of being. So it turns out that the thoughts based in the stress hormones, based in survival, those are the thoughts that begin to push the genetic buttons that create disease. In other words, a person wakes up in the morning, and the brain is a record of the past. The first thing they do when they wake up in the morning is they start thinking about their problems. And those problems are memories that are etched in the brain that are connected to certain people, certain objects, certain things at certain times and places. So if you believe that your thoughts have something to do with your destiny, the moment you think about your problems, you're thinking in the past, right? Mm-hmm. Now, every one of those problems has an emotion associated with them because we've experienced them. So the moment you remember your problems, now you feel unhappy. Now you feel anxious. Now you feel fear. So the moment we feel those emotions, it takes a thought and a feeling, a memory or an image and an emotion, a stimulus and a response, and we start conditioning the body emotionally into the past. Now, the body is so objective that it doesn't know the difference between the real-life experience that's creating that emotion and the emotion that person's fabricating by thought alone. The body's believing it's in that environmental condition. So if the environment signals the gene, and that's the truth, and the end product of an experience in the environment is an emotion, we're signaling the same genes, and genes make proteins. And if you keep signaling the same genes, you start down-regulating the gene to make cheaper proteins, and the body begins to break down. Now, that's an unconscious process. So what goes along with that is the moment the person feels that emotion of unhappiness or whatever it is, the brain checks in with the body and says, yeah, you're feeling pretty miserable, you're suffering. And we tend to generate more thoughts equal to the feeling that we have. And so then we get caught in this loop of thinking and feeling. So if we can't think greater than how we feel, or feelings have become the means of thinking, then we're thinking in the past. I'm starting to realize how conditioned we are into believing how limited we are. Mm-hmm. And as you start peeling those layers away and you break through those beliefs, those self-limiting thoughts and emotions, on the other side of that is where the miraculous happens. So you got to be willing to be in that place of discomfort long enough to reorganize order and begin to create more coherence. And then all of a sudden, you get this recalibration that goes on in the brain and body. And then the extent of that is that the ultimate thing is you start to see feedback in your life, those synchronicities, those coincidences, those opportunities. You're scratching your head going,
everything's falling into place.
Hey, I'm in the right place at the right time.
Everything I think about just comes to me.
Because your energy is synchronized. Yeah. Look, I mean, when you have coherence in the brain and heart, you have a laser of energy, and it could read information much better. You're living in stress, and your brain is shifting its attention from one person to another problem, to another thing, to another place to go. Each one of those things, there's an assignment of neurological networks in the brain. So the arousal of the stress hormones drives the brain into this high frequency, and you're trying to control and predict everything in your life. And your brain circuits are firing like a lightning storm in the clouds. When your brain's incoherent, you're incoherent, and you don't have a signal. You don't have a Wi-Fi signal. You're not connected to the field. How could you connect to energy and information if your signal hasn't become orderly? So that when people synchronize their energy into coherence, they can synchronize to a possibility in the future. And the synchronicities that are feedback from the environment are just a reflection of your energy. And that's the universe saying, follow the breadcrumbs. Do it again. Follow it again. Do it again. And now all of a sudden the person's not waking up in the morning like, oh, I gotta meditate now to create my future. They're kind of going like, I'm getting out of bed because I don't want the magic to end, right? They want to sustain that state so that the old
reality that they've lived in begins to transform into something new, and because there's no longer a vibrational match with everyone and everything in their past, present reality, there's a vibrational match to their future, and now their future is starting to give them signals. A habit is a redundant set of automatic, unconscious thoughts, behaviors, and emotions that's acquired through repetition. A habit is when you've done something so many times that the body now knows how to do it better than the mind. So now the person running through the same routine every single day is on autopilot, and their body's now dragging them into a predictable future based on what they did in the past, and they've lost their free will to a set of programs, right? So now you have the familiar past and you have the predictable future. Those are knowns. So the only place then, reasonably, where the unknown exists is the sweet spot of the generous present moment. That is when the body and mind are free from those conditions. So along with those emotions that influence the same thoughts, people start becoming more judgmental. They start becoming more impatient. They start becoming more entitled. They start getting more afraid, more anxious, more depressed. And now the body is literally being depleted of energy because it's believing that it's living in an emergency situation. And in emergency, you tap all of the body's resources for some threat, whether it's real or imagined. And so then when you're releasing all of these chemicals, we are literally drawing the body's life force and turning it into chemistry. And so for the short term, that's cool. But the arousal that's created from those stress hormones is a rush of energy. And so then people use the problems and the conditions in their life to reaffirm their conditioning or their addiction to that emotion. And in a sense, they become addicted to the life they don't even like. And this is why change is so hard. So then when a person makes up their mind to change and they say, okay, I'm not going to say I can't, I'm not going to judge another person, I'm not going to blame, I'm not going to complain, I'm not going to make excuses, I'm not going to be a victim, I'm not going to talk trash about anybody, I'm just going to stop. Well, that works out really well for the first couple hours. Then the body's saying you're out of schedule. You normally at 8 in the morning, you're getting traffic and you're angry. Then at 11 o'clock, you check your emails and you're really judgmental and frustrated. And the body's saying, oh, well, you've been doing this for the last 20 years. You're just going to stop today. So no, the body, which has been conditioned emotionally to be the mind, wants to return back to its familiar territory, to the known. So the body starts influencing the mind. And it says, come on, this is a good time to judge. Come on, this is a good time to suffer. It's your ex's fault. It's the government's fault. It's the weather, or the news, whatever it is. And if we accept, believe, and surrender to that thought without analyzing it, it slips by and it begins to program the autonomic nervous system to make those pharmacy of chemicals. And so that's when the person makes the same choice, does the same thing, creates the same experience just for that familiar feeling. Okay, I'll complain just so I can feel suffering. Then they'd rather be unhappy than step into the unknown. I think that emotions are energy in motion. And so let's just say that we share the same experiences, okay? We're friends and we share the same experience. Oh, you're from London, I've been to London, my daughter lives in London, and we have, hey, you do this, I do that, you did that, you own this, I own that, So what we do is we actually look to see when we meet people if we're matching neurologically, if we're matching emotionally. So if we share the same experiences, we share the same emotions. And if we share the same emotions, we can relate to one another. So this is where it gets sticky. So then the moment you start saying, that person did that to you once. Yeah, that person, I had a similar experience. That person did that to me. Now we open the door like, I'm going to use you to reaffirm my attachment to that emotion. And let's just work it up so that you can suffer and I can suffer, and then we can have a conversation. And literally, we're sharing the same energy. And if we're sharing the same energy, we're sharing the same information. And we're bound by an invisible field of energy that keeps us connected.
Yes.
So then what does it take to break that energetic field? An energy that's greater than the energy that's holding it together. That's how you separate atoms that become a molecule.
they're bound by an invisible field of energy that's keeping them connected. So you got to use a greater energy than the energy that's holding them together to separate them. Well, in order for you to change, then you can't have energy without awareness or consciousness. You got to go to a greater level of consciousness and change your energy. And nobody changes, Jay, until they change their energy. And when they change their energy, they change their life. So then you may say, well, this person, I use this person, and I use my enemy to reaffirm my addiction to hatred. I use my coworker to reaffirm my addiction to judgment. I use my ex to reaffirm my addiction to resentment. That we have these different people in our lives that we need to remind us of who we think we are. The enemy dies and you find another one. Your coworker leaves and you start judging another one. It's not that. So then when there's no longer a vibrational match, when you start doing the work, there's no longer a vibrational match with you and your past, present reality, that person or that condition any longer. That person or condition is going to spiral away because you're no longer in need of that. So then our life begins to change when we change our energy, and we begin to take our power back. That's essential for us to begin to create with. Now, some people can't handle that because they're not conscious that they're doing it. So they'll be working on their vision of the future, and yet they'll spend 2 hours lowering their energy back into victimization or suffering, and they want to know why their future isn't happening. Well, there's an unconscious program. Let's go after that. And once you start going after that, now all of a sudden your life starts to change again. So you can't say it doesn't work. On some level, we don't work. And if you're really invested in this, the question is, what is it about me? Where am I directing my attention or my energy? Who am I using to reaffirm some conditioning that I need to remember as my old self? So then when you stop reacting to the person, or the person's now complaining to you and you're not complaining back, it's going to be an uncomfortable moment because you're all of a sudden seeing a part of you used to be that you no longer are. And you have to be willing to not go there. And over time, that person will thank you and they'll say, I didn't even know that I was complaining that much. And by changing yourself, you help others. Self-love is no longer about pleasure or having a car. It's something that you're cultivating within you. So then imagine, we have research to show, and this is such a duality, that when you start seeing the brain start synchronizing, getting coherent. The front of the brain and the back of the brain, the two hemispheres coming together, and we can say to scientists that come and study our work, oh, watch this, Ed's gonna pop. What do you mean? Just watch, this is gonna be good. And all of a sudden you see this brain going into this kind of psychic union, the heart blows wide open, you see coherence going on, and you'll look around at that person, and there's tears running down their face. Imagine feeling so whole that it's impossible to want. I mean, how can you want when you're whole? Because you feel like you already have it. Now, when you reach that point, that's when the magic happens, because now you are worthy to receive. And the universe only gives us what we think we're worthy of receiving.
Share this with them, please.
Yeah, I think, for me, I'm curious and I'm a pragmatist. If you tell me something, all I want to know is how I'm going to use it in my life. And I'm not into dinner conversation because nobody changes from that. I'm a doer and I want to be around doers. And
this is why you and I connect so well, I think.
And obviously, you get a group of people that are passionate about transformation, and they've done some of the work. When we were doing our 4.5 day advanced workshops, right around the end of the event, I was seeing people starting to seeing some really great transformations, and I thought,
this is the pop.
Yeah, it's a pop. Big pops, and we were like, we had to send them home, and I was like, oh God, man, if I could just have them for a week. So we created these week-long events where people retreat from their lives, and
they remove the constant stimulation in their external environment that reminds them of who they think they are as a personality. They separate themselves from the people they know and the places they go and the things that they do at a certain amount of time in their routine, mundane life. So we'll bridge a little quantum physics with a little neuroscience, a little endocrinology, a little epigenetics, psychoneuroimmunology. Those are all sciences about possibility. And I now know that if you can give people sound scientific information, and, you know, for me, that's the language.
I know.
And then if they can turn to the person next to them and explain it, you're not going to get off the hook. If you can't explain it, it's not wired in your brain. But if you can build a model and explain it, you're installing the neurological hardware in your brain in preparation for the experience. So the more you understand what you're doing and why, the how gets easier because you can assign meaning to it. So then if I can set up the conditions and the environment and give them the proper instructions and push the envelope a little bit. And people who get their behaviors to match their intentions and their actions equal to their thoughts, they get their mind and body working together, they're gonna have a new experience. And the experience then is not only gonna enrich the philosophical circuits in their brain, because experience does that, but it's gonna produce an emotion. So they're gonna start feeling more unlimited. You gotta stay conscious and not go unconscious. And it turns out that 95% of the time we're unconscious. So if you're gonna stay conscious, then there's an element that also requires a certain amount of awareness or energy. And you gotta step outside of that unconscious state. So the thoughts that they're thinking are slipping by their awareness unnoticed because they're hardwired in their brain, because they've been saying, I can't, it's too hard, my life will never change, it's someone else's fault. Those thoughts have consequences in the body. So then if a person then becomes conscious of those unconscious thoughts, becomes aware of how they speak and how they act, and they notice how they're feeling, they're no longer the program. They're the consciousness outside the program, and that's the first step to change. So when you're distracted by your environment and you got your cell phone and you're tweeting and you're Instagramming and Facebooking and whatever people do, you're distracted by that feeling. But I now know that if you take a person and you say, okay, close your eyes, sit in the silence of any external stimulation, remove the environment, sit your body down like an animal. Body is the animal. Tell it to stay. I'm going to feed you. You can check your cell phone. You can shower. You can have your coffee. But when I say, and so then here comes the challenge, right? So, and then if you say then you're not going to live in the familiar past or predictable future, you're not going to think about how long you've been meditating, what you got to do. You labor for that present moment. People think when they do this that they're doing something wrong because there's such discomfort that comes with it. But they're in the unknown. They're actually doing it right. People say, I think I'm meditating wrong. I always say, oh, no, you're doing it right. Because when you notice that your body wants to get up and check your cell phone or have a cup of coffee, and you become aware that it's on autopilot and wants to do that, and you say, come on over here, and you return it back to the present moment, you're executing a will now that's greater than the program. And if the person wants to just get angry while they're sitting there, there's an arousal, and they notice the body is amping up and revving up, and they settle it back down. Now they're telling the body it's no longer the mind, that they're the mind. Now, we've researched this, and it's tedious in the beginning at first because David is fighting Goliath. But if you keep practicing it, just like training an animal, sooner or later the body acquiesces. Sooner or later the body is trained to a new mind. And when that happens, there's a liberation of energy. The body goes from particle to wave, from matter to energy, and there goes that emotion, literally liberated from the body as energy. So the person who has the strong emotion to some circumstance in their life, and they're working on lowering the volume of that emotion, the more they lower the volume of that emotion, the more they're going to take their attention off that person and problem, and they're going to take their power back. There's going to be a break in their attention from that circumstance. And now they build their own field. And now there's energy to heal. Now there's energy to create a new life. Now there's energy for the mystical moment because they've overcome their old personality self. So I think, it's not like thinking positively. That's not the message.
No.
It's overcoming until we become somebody else. And when that occurs and the person starts thinking differently
and they start acting differently and they start feeling differently, they're a new personality. And they start seeing those synchronicities and serendipities. How bad does it have to get? I mean, to what denominator, to what lowest level do you have to reach before people really make up their mind to change? My message is, why wait? I mean, when you're feeling so altered emotionally, you feel so bad, that's the moment you could actually see yourself for the first time, because you're not answering your cell phone, you're not responding to all your texts, you're not watching TV, you're not going out to dinners, you're not calling people back. Something's altered in you, and you're starting to become self-aware, right? So then people wait to that lowest moment where they can start to see themselves through the eyes of somebody else. Well, if you're waking up every day and you're combining a clear intention with an elevated emotion, and you're changing your emotional state to be elevated, you could still see the old self from an elevated point of view and stay conscious than from a limited point of view. And that's what I want for people. Like, let's go. I mean, what do you got to lose? What people are going to start wondering, like, did you change your medication? What's up with that guy? Something's different about him. You're not predictable any longer, right? And I always say to our community, when you're changing, you just stop talking about it. You're just too busy being it. Something's happening, and that's the repetition of getting a few days in a row of that really well. I always say, God, if you had a great meditation, you wake up feeling better at the end of that meditation than when you started, and you do that the next day, and then the next day, you're going to start feeling better all the time. And then your body's going to start feeling better, and everything's going to start feeling better, and you're going to start feeling better about life. So you ask a person, why are you so unhappy? Why are you so frustrated? Why are you so resentful? The moment you ask that, their brain is going to associate that emotion to a past event.
To a memory.
To a memory.
Yeah.
That's because they have nothing to look forward to in their future. So if you're not being defined by a vision of the future, it just means to me that you're more in love with your past than you are with the future. So how do you teach people to believe in a future that they can't see or experience with their senses yet, but they've thought about enough times in their mind that their brain is literally changed to look like the event has already occurred? The latest research in neuroscience says that's absolutely possible. We know that. And how do you teach a person to select a new possibility in their future and begin to emotionally embrace that future before it's made manifest to such a degree that their body, as their unconscious mind, is believing it's living in that future reality in the present moment, and they're signaling new genes in new ways ahead of the environment. Now, till their body begins to change to look like the event has already occurred. We've proven that that's possible. Now think about this.
So the more you think about your desired future, the joy, the gratitude, the feelings you want to have that are more positive, the more you think about it as a future thing happening, the more your body shifts now.
Exactly. So your body is believing it's living in that future reality in the present moment. Now think about this. The stronger the emotion you feel from some condition in your life, the more altered you feel inside of you, the more you narrow your focus on the cause, and the brain freezes an image and takes a snapshot. And that memory now is embossed in the brain. It's branded in there. So then people think neurologically within the circuits of those past experiences, and they feel chemically within the boundaries of those emotions. And the stronger the betrayal, the stronger the trauma, the more the body's living in the past, right? So how do you reverse that? So now, if you truly got passionate about a future, we've all done this. You get a wild idea in your mind, and you start holding on to that vision, and you're preoccupied with it. All of a sudden, the thought in your mind becomes the experience, and you start feeling the energy of the future. Now, the stronger the emotion you feel from that vision, the more you're going to pay attention to the picture in your mind, and now you're remembering your future.
And vice versa, the stronger you pay attention to the feeling of the past, pain, you're going to create the pain in this moment.
Exactly. So it requires a coherent brain, and we now know that there's a formula for that, and we've got beautiful research to show that people can do it. They just have to practice. And it requires a coherent heart, because resentment, frustration, impatience creates a very incoherent heart. And when that heart becomes incoherent, you stop trusting yourself. There's no energy there. You stop trusting in your future. So then, if there's physical evidence in your brain and body, physical evidence to look like the event has already occurred,
it's quite possible you'll be thinking neurologically within the circuits of your future, and you'll begin to feel chemically within the boundaries of that emotion of your future. And how you think and how you feel is your state of being. And now your state of being is living in the future instead of the past. Now, the moment you disconnect from the emotion of your future because of traffic or some coworker or your ex or whatever people come up with, now you're back to the energy of your past. And now you're going to start looking for it, analyzing, why hasn't it happened? Well, if you're feeling the emotion of your future, why would you look for it? Because you would feel like it already happened, and that is the place where the magic happens. So then you can't just do this, get up, and then return back to your old state of being. You got to maintain that modified state of mind and body.
How do you maintain it when life happens?
Well, let me finish.
If I punch you in the face right now, how do you maintain?
Well, of course. I mean, we all take blows in our lives, and we all react emotionally. But the question is, how long are you going to react?
Right.
So then, if you can't mediate and regulate your emotional reactions, and those emotions linger for days, that's a
years
mood.
for some people.
Mood, and then months, temperament, years, personality trait. So then the person's personality is literally based on the past. But they don't know that because they're doing it over and over again, and it becomes a subconscious program. So now, if it requires a coherent brain and a coherent heart, then we have to train people how to self-regulate. What thoughts do you want to fire and wire in your brain? What kind of attention and intention do you want to place so that that becomes the loudest voice in your head? And if you keep practicing it, the hardware becomes a software program, and it'll say, Jay, you can do anything. Jay, you live in no time and accomplish everything. Jay, you're unlimited. You just got to hang with it. On the other side of this is greatness. Whatever you want to program in there, you get to program in there. If you sat down and say, how am I going to be with my wife, my husband, my partner? How am I going to be with my kids? How am I going to be at work with my coworkers? How am I going to be in traffic? And you close your eyes and you begin to rehearse in your mind. If you're truly present, the brain does not know the difference between the real life experience and what you're imagining. So now the brain goes from a record of the past to a map to the future. Now you're installing the hardware. Keep practicing it. It becomes automatic, becomes easier. Now it's a software program. You may just start behaving differently. In order for you to really begin to explore the unknown aspect of yourself, you got to learn how to get beyond the known aspect of yourself. And if you keep coming back to the known, you're going to miss out on the unknown. So you would say, well, I don't know anything in the unknown. Of course, it's the unknown. And if you try to control it there, you're back to the known. If you try to predict it, you're back to the known. So you got to go through this trial and error of just kind of refining your attention, refining your ability. And it's just got to be something like playing tennis or playing golf or doing martial arts or working out or crocheting or dancing the salsa. You just got to keep going, man. In the beginning, it's tedious. And then when you start finding your groove, like our community, they don't miss their morning meditations. You know why? Because the magic is happening, and they know if they miss it, they're gonna cut off from the magic. So they, whether they're tired, whether they're hungover, whether they're in. You know, and if you wake up in the morning and you can't get your butt out of bed, you know what that means? It just means you can predict the feeling of everything that's going to happen in your life. And the body's resigned. So then, you know, when you went on a school trip when you were a kid, you know, you woke up before your parents because you knew something new was going to happen. That's the body going, wake up. It's something unexpected is going to happen. What happened to us, right?
Christmas Day.
So why not, you know, put in your time and then measure the effects of you what cause. I mean, become the scientist in your life and really start to experiment with it. Okay, let me change my energy. Let me just write down 4 thoughts that, like, it's too hard, I'll start tomorrow, this doesn't feel right, whatever it is. It's this person's fault. Just write those down and say, these thoughts, like Gandalf on the bridge. You may not pass today. This is the end. So then if you become conscious of those thoughts, now you're the governor of your thoughts. What actions, what behaviors do you want to change? Do you complain? Do you blame? Do you judge? Do you make excuses? How do you talk? Do you speak limited? Just pick 4 things that you're not going to do any longer. What emotions get you in trouble? What are the emotions
that you're addicted to too, right?
That you're addicted to that keep you returning back to your past. And if you don't know, Close your eyes for about 30 minutes and just watch where your mind goes and watch your feelings and just say, okay, it's frustration, it's unworthiness, it's self-doubt, it's guilt, it's frustration, it's shame. Just become conscious of those and just review them in your mind so that you don't go unconscious them in your waking day. We have 1,000 reasons. I have more than 1,000 reasons every day to be unhappy with managing companies and staff and people, all that. But then when you rise above that and you choose just who you want to be, I think it makes a big impression on your family, first yourself, and your family and your friends and the people you work with, and then finally our communities. So I think that people are starting to figure that out there. And when they imagine oxytocin levels in our student body, the love hormone, the love chemical, 200 times outside of normal. The latest research on oxytocin is slight elevation in oxytocin. It's impossible to hold a grudge. Now, so then what that means is you feel so amazing that why would you want to hold a grudge against that person? So forgiveness then is not something that you have to try to do to be spiritual. It's the side effect of saying, I don't want to give up this feeling for you or anybody, so I'm letting it go. I'm freeing you. I'm freeing myself. And my goodness, there's more liberation of energy. I call that the natural state of being. And we're knocking on that door. Why? Because as you begin to open your heart to life again, and you start trusting in your future and trusting in yourself a little bit more, and you start self-regulating with your heart, you do that properly, and you lead from that place, from that level of awareness, your life will change in dramatic ways. And why is that essential? Because when people start doing that effectively, oxytocin signals nitric oxide. Nitric oxide signals a chemical called endothelial-derived relaxing factor. And that causes the arteries in your heart and lungs, Jay, to literally swell. Just like when your sexual organs are aroused and blood flow moves into them, male and female, that's a different consciousness. There's a different energy in there. Imagine the same intensity moving into your heart. That's what people are experiencing. That is a level of love. It's not like a love for your puppy. It's not like the love for your partner. This is transcendent of that. This is the most familiar, unfamiliar feeling you will ever have. It'll be distant and at the same time very close. And you'll start to see the hidden meaning behind all things. And now, when you walk in the presence of your greatest betrayer, the person who threw you under the bus, whatever it is, when you walk in from this place, there will be no emotional reaction. You will just see that person for who they are, who you used to be. Now, compassion then is no longer something that you have to try to do. It's the end product of doing the work. And I think that mystics and saints and masters of old understood this. So when they thought of that person, they didn't allow that thought to produce a feeling or an energy that would lower their energy. They understood that when they had the thought of that person, they saw their limitation. It wasn't hurting them. It was only hurting themselves. Now, I think that if the world was doing that, wow, we'd have a very different world. Thoughts, to me, produce an electrical charge in the quantum field, and feelings produce a magnetic charge in the quantum field.
Thoughts produce a what?
An electrical charge.
Okay.
And feelings produce a magnetic charge. And how you think and how you feel broadcasts an electromagnetic signature that influences every single atom in your life. The thought sends the signal out. Now think about this. And the feeling draws the event back. So you could have the intent that you want wealth, you want health, you want success. That's your intent, that's your thought. But if you're waiting for the experience to happen to feel it, then you're not drawing the experience to you because you're not feeling the emotion, right? So then teaching people once again how to balance their thoughts and feelings, because you can enter that cycle either place. Sometimes we do a meditation, we start opening our heart, we start elevating the body's energy, and then those emotions can drive certain thoughts of your future. Other times, you open your awareness, you create brain coherence, you have the vision of your future, you begin to emotionally experience it. However you want to jump on that cycle, and then sustain it, because the longer you're conscious of that energy, the more you're drawing your future to you. So then most people spend their lives, right? We live in this realm called space-time, three-dimensional reality, and you move your body through space. In three-dimensional reality, it takes time.
Yeah.
So everything, all your goals, all your dreams, all your visions, you're going to have to get your body up and drag it through space every day to pay off that, that home that's in your future, right?
Right.
When you create from the field instead of from matter, when there's a vibrational match between your energy and some potential, and your thoughts and feelings are coherent, now you are going to begin to collapse time and space, or the experience is going to be drawn to you. Now you're the vortex to your destiny, and now you don't have to go anywhere to get it, because you're not playing by the rules of three-dimensional reality. You're playing by the rules of energy and the quantum.
Now I've got a special bonus clip that I think you're going to enjoy, but before that, it's time for the good deed of the day. This is something new. I believe that you're built to serve, and it feels so good to do something nice for somebody else. So good deed of the day, put down in the comments one thing that you need help with, that you're working on, that you love some support or guidance on, and then 2, go comment on somebody else's comment and give them some love, give them some support, give them some encouragement, maybe give them some connections, try to help them solve that problem, even if it's saying, I believe in you. That one little bit of encouragement can be the difference between somebody quitting and continuing on. So the good deed of the day, in the comments below, write down one thing that you need help on, that you're struggling with, that you're working on, and then part 2 is go give love to somebody else in the comments too, and let them know that you believe in them as well.
15, 20 years ago, everybody wanted to stay in the philosophical realm. Nobody wanted to do anything with it. But this is a time in history where it's not enough to know. This is a time in history to know how, because information is so available, right? I mean, you don't need a doctor, you don't need a priest, you don't need a rabbi, you don't need a governor, you don't need a teacher to gain information. You don't need an authority any longer. Because of technology, we have access to information. Well, information creates awareness. And awareness is consciousness. And you can't have consciousness without energy. So people are beginning to wake up with a greater level of awareness of what's possible. So 15 years ago, 20 years ago, 10 years ago, I walked out and there was always a little resistance. But now people are coming because they want to actually experience the truth of it. So that makes my job easier, because I can just walk out and just fire away, because people are prepared, they're informed, they're ready. So anything that's not consistent with that energy or that level of awareness, those paradigms are beginning to break down. Whether it's education, whether it's religion, whether it's politics, economics, the environment, the medical model, everything's collapsing because people are informed. So I love that idea, because when people show up and they say, well, listen, I understand that I have a health condition. I understand that it's taken me 10 years of being unhappy, 10 years of living in stress, 10 years of living in fear. That's actually begin to signal or select and instruct the gene that creates the disease. Well, it may take me some time then to unlearn that process, to break that conditioning process. So there's a practical understanding now. But something amazing has happened. I mean, we've spent over 10 years doing very advanced scientific studies. We've done over 8,500 brain scans. We've measured so many thousands of hearts, because if you're going to create a new future, it requires a clear intention and elevated emotion. Well, let's train our people how to create really, really high-level brain coherence and really, really, really self-regulating heart coherence. Why? Because if you're going to believe in that future that you're creating with all of your heart, it better be opened and activated, and you better know how to do that, and you better understand the science of what happens. We've measured gene regulation, 7,500 different gene regulations. We know you can change your gene expression in 4 days. We've measured it. You're not doomed by your genes. You're your own genetic engineer. That you can lengthen your life. And we've seen telomeres actually lengthen 60 days of meditation, that you add days to your life. You're changing your genetic future, that you can strengthen your immune system by thought alone. That's the evidence from the scientific perspective. And people love the evidence because they start to see that's possible. You're not going to find that in a pharmaceutical commercial. You're not going to find that out there in the world. You got to really be hungry and look for it. So then that sets the stage for the person to come and want to have that experience. There may not be so quick to say, hey, I want to heal my body right away. They may say, I need to get my brain and heart coherent first. And I got to begin to put my effort into learning how to do this, like learning any skill.
What's the impact that you want to have on the world?
I think that the end game for me is to empower people to such a degree that they realize that they need less things outside of them to make them happy, less things outside of them to regulate their moods and their behaviors, and that they begin to use the kind of the power that we all have access to, and to really and to change the world, to make a difference so that there's more peace, there's more wholeness, there's more connection, that we support and love each other, we serve better. And I think that we have to start, for the most part, if everybody's working on themselves and doing their best to present the greatest ideal of themselves to the world, I think the world will be a better place. And so that's my passion, and I'm witnessing it happening now more than I ever thought I would.
If you believe that your thoughts have something to do with your destiny, that your thoughts create your life, let's examine the thoughts that you think. Now, you think 60 to 70,000 thoughts in one day. Out of those 60 to 70,000 thoughts that you think in one day, 90% of those thoughts are the same thoughts as the day before. So the same thoughts will always lead to the same choices. The same choices will always lead to the same behaviors. The same behaviors will always create the same experiences, and the same experiences always produce the same emotions. And those same emotions then drive our very same thoughts. And our biology, our neurocircuitry, our neurochemistry, our neurohormones, and even our genetic expression stays exactly equal to how you think, how you act, and how you feel. Now, how you think, how you act, and how you feel is called your personality. And your personality creates your personal reality. That's it. So then if you believe just the slightest bit in this idea that your personality creates your personal reality, and you wanted to change your personal reality, that means you'd have to begin to change your personality by thinking about what you've been thinking about and change it. To begin to become conscious of your unconscious habits and behaviors and modify them. And then look at the emotions that keep you connected to past experiences and decide if those emotions belong in your future. You see, most people try to create a new personal reality as the same personality, and it doesn't work. We literally have to become someone else. So reason this with me. A habit is a redundant set of automatic, unconscious thoughts, behaviors, and emotions that's acquired through frequent repetition. A habit is when you've done something so many times that your body knows how to do it as well as your mind. So if you're thinking the same thoughts 90% of the time as the day before, you're demonstrating the same behaviors 90% of the time, and you're embracing the same emotions as the day before 90% of the time, over time, you begin to fire the same circuits in your brain in the same sequences, in the same patterns, in the same combinations. Now, there's a principle in neuroscience that says that nerve cells that fire together wire together. So as you think the same thoughts that lead to the same choices, that of course produce the same behaviors that lead to the same experiences, that ultimately produce the same emotions, that in time you begin to hardwire your brain into the same finite pattern. Now that box in your brain, there's no literal box in your brain, but that finite signature ultimately becomes your identity. So then most people, by the time they're 35 years old, become a set of memorized behaviors, emotional reactions, unconscious attitudes, beliefs, and perceptions that function like a subconscious computer program. 95% of who you are by the time you're 35 years old is a memorized state of being in which you've done something so many times that your body now is doing it better than your brain. Every time you learn something new, you add a new stitch to the three-dimensional tapestry of your gray matter. And if you begin to think about what you learned, you're causing your brain to fire in new sequences, in new patterns, in new combinations. And whenever you make your brain work differently, you're changing your mind, because mind is the brain in action. So we could say then that new thoughts should lead to new choices, and new choices should lead to new behaviors, and new behaviors should create new experiences, and new experiences then should create new emotions, and those new emotions should inspire new thoughts, and that's called evolution.
When you start practicing creating that brain and heart coherence, you can believe in a future that you can't see or experience with your senses yet, but you've thought about enough times in your mind that it's actually, there's physical evidence in your brain to look like it's already happened. And you can begin to understand, you can select a new potential in the quantum field and every day emotionally embrace that future reality to such a degree that your body begins to believe it's living in that future reality in the present moment. And you're signaling new genes and new ways to change your body to look like it's already happened. Now think about this. If there's physical evidence by thought alone in your brain and body to look like your wealth or your future has already happened, it's already happened. And you're already it. So it's not about your wealth. It's not about your health. It's not about your freedom. It's who you become. So then as you overcome, you become someone else. And so most people don't understand that that the truth is that every time you overcome yourself a little bit more, the side effect is that you love yourself a little bit more. If the word meditation means become familiar with, right? Yes. Then, people say, oh, well, you shouldn't focus on the negative. Well, really? That's 95% of who you are. And you got to begin to dismantle or denature that old personality. And that means you're going to have to come up against the cravings that the body has emotionally. Like it's 8 o'clock in the morning and you're doing your meditation. You're normally in traffic and you want to get angry and your body's going, hey, you're off schedule. So let me just find something that's mapped in the brain that I'll bring up a past experience why you can feel a little anger. Well, now once you become aware of that, now the game is on, right? Yes. Because now you're working to become conscious of that and not go unconscious again. And it takes an incredible amount of awareness. Yes. It takes a great amount of consciousness, and you can't have consciousness without energy. So you got to raise your energy in order to get to it. Otherwise, you're going to be consumed. Yes. You're going to return back, right? So if you start becoming familiar, so conscious of those unconscious thoughts, they would never slip by your mind unchecked by you. Now, that is when you really catch yourself, right? And the research shows that you can get better at this. You could actually sense the thought before it comes. So then you start firing and wiring new thoughts. You start thinking to yourself, who am I going to be when I open my eyes? Well, how am I going to make a difference in the world today? Who am I going to be? How am I going to love? How am I going to give? How am I going to serve? How am I going to contribute? What things do I want to really do today? And in the act of closing your eyes and just thinking about and rehearsing what you're going to do, your brain doesn't know the difference. And if you get caught up in it, you begin to install the neurological hardware in your brain to look like you've already done it. Now the brain's no longer a record of the past. Now it's a map to the future. You are priming your brain, and if you keep doing it, the hardware will become a software program. You know what that means? You just might start acting like a happy person. Well, there's no surprise there. You installed the circuits. Stress hormones arouse the body, so you have your attention on your body. Stress hormones alert the brain, so you're aware of everything in your environment, like an octopus with tentacles in all different directions. You got to control and predict everything in your life. And if you're living by the hormones of stress, you're always investing your attention and energy into the known future based on the past. So you're on a line of time here, in a timeline. So then let's think about it. How are you going to make thought more real than anything else? How are you going to create from thought? Well, let's close our eyes. Let's disconnect from the environment. Less sensory information coming into the brain, less distraction, as you said. Let's play some soft music in the background. Let's stick some earplugs in our ear, whatever you want to do. Diminish sensory, but now you're sitting down. You're not eating. You're not tasting. You're not smelling. You're not feeling. So there's less sensory input coming to your body. So then now your brainwaves begin to change. They start slowing down, and you move from this beta brainwave pattern where you're aware that you have a body in space and time, or your attention is on the outer world, or your senses are giving you information. Less sensory information. Now your inner world starts becoming more real than the outer world, and you're not the voice in your head that's always talking to you. As your brain waves change, you start seeing in images and pictures, and symbols and less in that vocalization, that sub-vocalization. So your brainwaves start changing the alpha. You're going to start creating, start dreaming, pretending, right? So then, if you say to your body, you're going to sit down for an hour, and I know you're on a program because you wake up every morning and do the exact same thing, and now I'm going to make you sit, just like sit to an animal. You sit, you stay, and your body's going to say, I'm going to die, my bladder is going to explode, I need a coffee, I got a lot of emails to do. That's the program. And you say to your body, today we do battle. Today, this is it. And you sit through that and you make your way, even though your body's trying to get up and you keep settling it back down. I'm telling you, when you start your day that day, you will be more kind, more loving, less judgmental, more patient, more present, because you're mastering the present moment. That means you're not in the predictable future. You're not in the familiar past. You're mastering time. And so then, if where you place your attention is where you place your energy, and all of your attention is in the present moment, you've got a lot of energy to do amazing things. And you know when someone's present with you in your life because they're paying attention to you. And you know when they're not present with you because they're not paying attention to you. So the act of getting more present means you're putting a lot of energy in the present moment, and you're taking your power back from all these things and people in your life. So we teach people this. As they start breaking through and they start being able to unfold into this field as an awareness, and they're not putting their attention on their boss or their ex or their wife or their kids or their cell phone or their WhatsApp or their Facebook, they're not thinking at all. So then, as they're sensing the space, they can't think. And if you can't think, you can't analyze. And if you can't analyze, the analytical mind is what separates the conscious mind from the subconscious. You just open the door.
Wow.
And so now you can reprogram in there.
If you want more top 10 videos, they're not on this channel anymore. I have a dedicated channel just for it. Go check it out. The link is right there next to me. Continue to believe, and I'll see you there.